qualities of hygiene weren't quite as up to snuff back in those days either.
What were the 2 leading causes of death during the Revolutionary War?
Death,
Yeah.
murder by war, and shit, it might be dysentery, actually. Because I know that people were like constantly shitting, like all the time. There's even stories about and it's beyond the Revolutionary War too, like up until fucking I want to say Andrew Jackson, maybe even beyond that. But once they started selling, what do you call it, like laudanum and shit like that at the fucking local quote unquote apothecary or general store, because it's got opioids in it. Yeah, so it's like, hey, I'm not shit anymore, and I feel invincible.
For now.
For now. Until I run out of laudanum.
Until your colon blows up. Like a certain celebrity that passed away recently.
What? Who?
Never heard that? Matthew Perry's colon exploded inside his body.
What? That's how he died?
No, he lived through that.
Whoa, Jesus Christ. I thought he just fucking OD'd or something, or complications from years of...
So, okay, hold on. The colon blow happened because the years of opiate abuse.
Yeah.
And it plugged him up. And he was...
What, did he have like fucking 40 pounds of undigested red meat in his colon like the Duke?
I don't think it was red meat. I think it was just that the opiates were like, he was like 40 Vicodin a day.
Yeah, that'll stop you up. But I thought he'd been clean for a while.
Yeah, but that's when it happened, was when he was taking all the drugs. And that's when he started trying to wean himself off of alcohol and opiates.
Oh, so he wasn't quite all the way, he didn't have his chips yet, basically.
Well, they found no evidence of methamphetamine or...
that would have helped him shit.
Yeah, or heroin or opiate based. They think what happened was he slipped, because the toxicology report, like preliminary reports, show that there's no foul play. Like he probably...
No drugs in his system?
Yeah, he either had like a heart attack and fell and hit his head and just drowned. Because
he was in water?
Yeah, he was in his hot tub.
Oh.
And it had allegedly, based on...
Well, I thought you said his fucking colon exploded. What
yeah, but he lived. He had an M hole.
Oh, that happened previously.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying that's how he died.
No.
Okay.
I think it's kind of fucked up that the way he died, now surviving that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, goddamn, dude.
Well, I mean, that's I guess he went a slightly more dignified way than turning the fucking hot tub into Swiss Miss fucking Cocoa. I don't know, fucking that's a bad way to go.
I agree. Rest in peace, Matthew Perry.
Yeah.
Dude, these fucking hornets out here.
The Japanese will remember you for centuries to come.
Yeah.
Sorry, hornets.
Yeah, dude, like every time a hornet flies by the window, it's like its shadow is like 5 times bigger than the fucking thing.
Maybe they're from Japan.
Here no.
To escort the ghost of Matthew Perry to the world of wind and ghosts. You seen those Japanese hornets?
Yes.
Fucking nightmarish.
That wasn't a voice effect either.
I think they're the kind that lay their fucking eggs in living animals, and then they fucking chest burster alien. That's where they got that idea. Because there's a fucking some kind of wasp or something that really does that in real life.
Do they spell artifacts differently in England?
They spell everything different in England.
ARTEFACTS, or is that just...
That may be old-timey also.
I think someone's...
I was looking at a lot of these like
very articulate
Middle Ages, pamphlets and shit and whatnot. Back in the olden times in the UK, the letter F and S were interchangeable. So, like, what's really funny is that when you read those things, like, all I can picture are people with, like, wooden fake teeth.
Well, hell, even the V and U were the same letter as well. So you have to look at it and like, oh my god.
So now we're recording.
Yeah, we've been recording again.
Hey, everybody. This is the Kooks Cranks and Iconoclast podcast. I'm Mike.
I'm Matt.
And today is the day of all nights. Today is our season 4 finale in our complex, arbitrary numbering system. And I believe at the end of our little Halloween thing we did over the month of October, I said that there'd be a little bit of spooky left over, and this is sort of the residual ectoplasm from that, the Halloween hangover.
Yeah, that crusts over on your pants.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't realize it till you walk into the restaurant.
Or the ceiling, or, just wherever.
Yeah,
Depending on, what you ate and how much of it.
Dear, you have a little in your hair. There, yeah, there you go. You got it.
Is that hair gel? As a note to myself to insert that. Yeah, today we are covering someone who...
A mystery.
Well, you know what? Let me just, let's do this. Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
What language am I speaking?
English.
You know why?
No.
Because of John motherfucking Dee. That's why. Dr. John Dee, even though he never really got a real medical doctor's certificate?
Doctorate?
Yeah, doctorate. Didn't come in his Cracker Jack box.
No.
But he got honorary titles at the wazoo eventually. Dr. John Dee, Middle Ages, 16th century occultist, kind of the real-life equivalent of Merlin for Queen Elizabeth. The original 007, I know I kind of went on a whole tangent that was unnecessary way back in our Ian Fleming episode, trying to connect to the James Bond mythos. But we're circled back around again. We're talking about Dr., quote-unquote, James motherfucking Dee, the man who coined the phrase, the British Empire, and planned it out and presented it to his superiors, and also kind of like Ian Fleming, his superiors took the credit for it, kind of, pretty much, even though he planned it all out. But
I was out there building those ships before I even sent this up here to the office. I needed to requisition.
Fucking TPS reports.
Yeah.
Dr. John Dee, famous polymath, brilliant man. Went to college at 15. We'll name the place later. But yeah, he went in at 15, and I don't know. I was just saying to Matt here.
He went to Cambridge.
Cambridge, that's what it is. Yeah, mathematician, scientist, expert bongo player, and occultist. And he also talked to angels. He was also an occultist in a weird time in history where it was sort of like, we'll kind of burn you at the stake, but at the same time, I don't know.
If you can't prove this math is useful,
yeah.
Like, am I going to need this after this conversation, John? Because otherwise I'm going to have to burn you.
I need an algorithm to get winning lottery numbers on my desk in the morning stat. Yeah. He is mostly known and somewhat ridiculed in hindsight from throughout years of history for establishing and maintaining contact with angels.
Demons. Spirits.
Well, depends on who you ask. But it's in his trafficking with these entities. Some would say aliens. I'm going to throw that out there right now, too. Some would say that in his trafficking with these entities, we'll say, is where he kind of formulated the ideas for the British Empire. Various inventions and ideas of his. But the whole overall story of a man and his potentially crooked business partner, if not crooked, perhaps mentally ill or on drugs, something, disreputable business partner, we'll say. These two guys interacted with what they believed wholeheartedly, with 100% true faith, were angels. And these angels more or less influenced history all through today. Like we said, he coined the phrase the British Empire. So technically, a large portion of history could rest at the feet, being entirely responsible by non-human intelligences. That's going to be my strange side of it. But the whole story is very, very weird. It goes in and out. Let's see. We're going to talk about angels. We're going to talk about spirits. We're going to talk about sorcery. We're going to talk about the apocalypse. We're going to talk about espionage, occult espionage, international intrigue, mysteries.
Even the
Mysteries. How do those work?
and how the hell is John Dee connected to the Shakespeare conspiracy? What?
Yeah, you
All
went,
that next.
we both went down some strange rabbit holes independently of one another. That's our man, and I will say, in a bit of a hint, since this is the season finale, this fella also is going to. I mean, he's already stretching back in time to the Ian Fleming episode in a way, or stretching back from there to today. Either
Reaching
way,
forward.
a connection is made, and he's going to have some bearing on some things that we will also be covering in the future as well. So, more mysteries. Before we get to the good doctor, what's weird this week? Oh, me first?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Okay, I got a couple things. I was looking at chimp attacks because there's been a lot of them.
Dude, I thought you weren't going to cover.
I'm not
Drope.
going. I'm just saying. I'm explaining my thought process.
A rash of ape attacks.
Yeah, attacks. Who was the other one? Oh, yeah, Diane Fossey. There was Diane Fossey and Sigourney Weaver. Monkeys in the Mud. What was that movie called? Gorillas in the Mist. I fucking had her name earlier.
Planet of.
No, but the new Planet of the Apes does look pretty boss.
Jane Goodall.
Jane Goodall, that's right. So yeah, I was looking at various horrific incidents in which, we'll say, domesticated and or pet apes were responsible for horrible, horrible things. I'm sure that most of our stranger listeners or the people who listen to this show, I'm almost certain are the same kind of people who would be very interested in chimp attacks and things like that, and maybe looking at the end results thereof. And that's what I was looking around at. I found a top 10 list, which in itself is mind-boggling because I didn't think there'd be more than 10 brutal chimp attacks to make a list. But that took me to some really dark places. I'm not gonna go into it entirely, but I will say that people out there in Radioland, send your positive and healing vibes out into the world for the eventual rescue of Pony the orangutan. And I'll leave it at that. But from there, that took me to some other strange places. It's like going down those weird wiki rabbit holes. You know, you click on one thing, click on another, and sort of build a psychic map for the government to trace your thought process. Anyways, the only notes I fucking had from that, and I don't even know how I got to these places really, but several things. I got onto something about the Mandela effect and many worlds theory, and I don't know, I had one of those paradoxical sort of, I don't know, it basically boiled down to, what if there's an alternate universe where there are no alternate universes?
It's pretty deep, dude.
Does it work? Is it possible? The door swings both ways. Boom, triple entendre. What else? Oh, yeah. I had another strange idea about a potential Bruce Wayne / Batman conspiracy theory. Completely original, my own idea. You know how, like, Bruce Wayne's parents were all about making Gotham City a better place, etc., blah, blah, blah.
In their opinion, yes.
Cleaning it up, yeah, so forth and so on. I don't know, I had this strange idea that what if his dad being a doctor, maybe they both had, like, inoperable cancer or something, and so his dad, paid a guy to kill them, and had Alfred there to take care of him as like a backup insurance plan of sorts. to ensure that Bruce would grow up with a stomp out crime in Gotham City and do it with all his money, lifelong grudge, basically, with Alfred there sort of reverse psychology poking him in the fucking back to keep going the whole time.
But what if it didn't work? Then you wouldn't have a TV show or a movie or a huge franchise.
Then it would just be real life.
Yeah, but he'd be a billionaire. I've got one. This one comes from AP.
Associated Press?
Uh-huh.
Uh-oh.
4 men charged in theft of satirical golden toilet titled America at Churchill's birthplace. And they have a picture of a fake gold toilet that is actually connected to plumbing, it would appear, with butt wipe.
Wait. What is this, like a performance art thing?
Well, it was an art piece, an art installation. 4 men were charged Monday over the theft of an 18-karat gold toilet from Blenheim Palace, the sprawling English country mansion where British wartime leader Winston Churchill was born.
Yeah, that's made up.
It's from the Associated Press.
I meant the name Weinheim. Sounds made up.
The toilet, valued at £4.8 million, or if you use real money, $5.95 million, was an artwork entitled America and intended as a pointed satire about the excessive wealth by Italian conceptual artist Maurizio Catalan. And it was part of an installation in the palace near the city of Oxford a few days before it vanished overnight in September of 2019. But I guess they finally charged the guys for it.
So they're being charged with
Theft of a toilet.
but it's not actually an actual gold toilet. Wait, okay, hold on.
I think it's actually
an actual gold toilet.
18-karat gold toilet.
But wait, was the theft a performance piece?
No.
Okay.
They've actually been charged with, they're going to jail.
But they are conceptual artists?
It was a conceptual art piece.
The toilet was.
With real gold.
Okay, I got
and
you.
People broke in there and stole it.
That is weird. That's weirdly confusing.
Who shits on an 18-karat gold toilet?
The same people that shit on the rest of humanity day in and day out, I'm sure.
I mean, and the bathroom doesn't look very posh either. It looks like the door opens right up and, like, it's a curved bathroom and there's no privacy. I'm using all the English versions.
Right.
Yeah.
No privacy in the privy.
Yeah, and there's a door stop.
Loo, I believe it's called.
So it's a very small.
And, wait, and what connection did this have to Churchill, by the way?
It's in his birth home.
Okay, weird. Okay.
Well, he was born in a palatial mansion.
Yeah, he comes
because he's
from
a sir.
Some monies and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to
And
do
the
mine
Queen's
over
Navy.
when you're done.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would appear that in 2021, the Thames Valley Police force investigating the theft suggested that it would be a challenge to recover the toilet. The 4 suspects will appear at Oxford's Magistrate Court November 28th, prosecutors say. So they picked up a toilet.
And it was gold, and they're walking out of the house with it.
And no one stopped them. No one even thought it was weird that they're like, oh, the plumbers must be here to replace this fucking gold toilet because Winston Churchill had such shitty taste. Ha ha ha. Gold toilet theft.
Yeah.
This is the shit
There's
I'm talking
another
about.
gold toilet in New York that I am inspired by this story to go steal.
I just cannot.
After the owner goes to jail, probably.
It's just ridiculous. And it's just a regular toilet. In fact,
It doesn't have a bidet or nothing on it.
Not that I can see.
When you flush, it doesn't go yum 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 yum
Nah.
yum.
Anyways, that's what I got.
Okay, so mine, like we said, we're covering John Dee, so I'm researching and studying up on John Dee and all this various occultism and sorcery of the Middle Ages. This is sort of a strange time for it because it's right out of medieval times. There are no utensils. Would you like a Pepsi? Medieval times. By the way, from medieval times, after that come the Middle Ages. So once again, there's a weird, like, are we going to burn them? Are we not? I guess it just kind of depends on your socio-political and or economic
Wouldn't this count as the Enlightenment?
viability. Yeah, it's sort of the starting point.
Or like the end of the Renaissance, beginning of the Enlightenment?
Or yeah, it is the Renaissance, sort of, yeah. Because around the time that he dies, King James becomes king, and then shit gets dark again.
Becomes president of
Like,
England.
real dark, yeah. So, yeah, I guess you could call it the Renaissance / Enlightenment. I feel like the Renaissance is more associated with Italy and...
Well, I mean, it's all over Europe, but it started in like the 1300s to the 1600s. And then
Yeah. I guess, well, yeah, Enlightenment kind of covers it better, I guess, because there's more...
I wish there was another Enlightenment period coming because everyone's starting to get really fucking dumb.
Oh, don't you know? Haven't you heard of the Dark Enlightenment?
No, enlighten me.
The Dark Enlightenment...
And illuminate me, Mike.
It's from what I've seen, it does have some cool sort of concepts and ideas and philosophical quandaries attached to it. Unfortunately, it's been largely affiliated with the alt-right. But there are a few non-affiliated sort of thinkers and cogitators and philosophers and sophists involved with it. It's basically post-capitalism and fucking accelerationism, and there's a big like preoccupation with death metal and objective philosophy and H.P. Lovecraft. Sort of a weird melange of dark philosophy. Yeah, dark enlightenment. I don't know. There's a lot of cool books associated with it, though. There's this one by a horror writer called The Conspiracy Against the Human Race by Thomas Ligotti, and it's pretty badass. It basically, here's the best way I can put it. It inspired, what's his name? Yes, they do. That guy.
Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, his character in True Detective is very much like sort of an encapsulation of the Dark Enlightenment philosophies. And Dark Enlightenment philosophies and ideas were very influential on the overall story of first season of True Detective, which is really the only one that's worth a shit. So yeah, I was looking at all this shit and like magic and whatnot, sorcery, and it kind of, and England, jolly old. And I was sort of going down the rabbit hole of interrelated ideas, and I was looking at the Enfield poltergeist case. For those who don't know, this is I hesitate to use the word infamous.
So famous, it's infamous.
Yeah.
What did that ghost sound like again when it possessed her?
They had a plethora of ghosts because it was infamous. Yeah, there was a little girl named Janet Hodgson, I believe, and she was not possessed, but she was frequently being used as a quote-unquote mouthpiece for this ghost / poltergeist that was haunting her apartment where she lived with her sister and brother and mom. And yeah, there was the ghost would like, I don't know, speak through her, and these fucking paranormal investigators show up and start hanging around, and they're like surrogate daddy and whatnot, but they're like asking her questions, trying to talk to the ghost, and they're like, "What's your name?" And the little girl would be like, "Don't go with you." It's like there's pictures and audio and video of this little fucking like 11-year-old girl talking like a, I don't know, like a fucking East End fucking cabbie, basically.
Like a 60-something Cockney barfly.
Yeah. And then, of course, at some point, like all hauntings and supernatural and paranormal stories back in those days, those fucking frauds, Ed and Lorraine Warren, show up at some point and try to capitalize on it or leech the fame away to themselves in some form or fashion. Those two are fucking frauds.
How do we know that, though?
I'm willing to bet my soul on it. If I'm wrong that they're frauds, Ed Warren at least is a fraud and a piece of shit, kind of, from what I've heard. His wife is a sweet lady. Those Conjuring movies are cool. They would show up at hauntings or any place where ghosts were supposedly. Like, you've seen the Conjuring movies, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The second one's based on the infield poltergeist. The first one is based on, like, I guess they call it a haunting in Connecticut or something. I might be thinking of another movie. And they're also associated with the Amityville Horror, which has been pretty much thoroughly debunked.
Yes.
Fucking Butch DeFeo did kill his entire family with a shotgun while on LSD, but he was also a dumb, stupid piece of shit. And I think he had nurturing some strange delusions of fucking mafia tough guyness throughout his family. Plus, their dad beat the shit out of him and whatnot. Not a happy household. But when the new family moved into the Amityville Horror House, the Lutz family, Ed and Lorraine Warren showed up, and Ed was basically like, hey, I heard you guys got some kind of ghost problem, freaky ghost problem.
Well, here's your problem.
Want to make some money? So he would do that all over the place.
They're
Plus, he's a fucking just...
One of the lawyers involved in that represented the Lutz when they were writing the book.
Yeah.
He actually sued...
He wrote it, I think.
He sued the guy that wrote it because he was...
Oh, okay.
He said, hey, well, I told them about this stuff before any of it even happened, so they're taking stuff that I told them, my intellectual property. Oh, so it's all made up. It's all lies. This whole thing is just a vicious pack of lies.
It's all IP.
Yeah.
When people start fucking making money off of it.
Yeah. But
did I tell you about the conspiracy theorist who's trying to sue other conspiracy theorists for using his quote-unquote IP, his fucking story that supposedly really happened to him?
That he got abducted by aliens for 20 years and came back in his body?
He was put in the secret space program as a child.
Yeah, they had his deposition on that one channel.
Yeah, Y-Files, that's right. Yeah. No, I've already been familiar with this guy, Corey Good, and his fucking... He's another one. Like, man, there's all these people in the paranormal world especially. Like, you know how I feel about Ghost Bros and all those fucking bullshit ghost hunter shows? Because the implication behind a real ghost is staggering. That means a whole lot, and it changes everything we know about everything, pretty much. And it's the same in the conspiracy world, but to a lesser degree, because the conspiracy world is way more easily prone to fucking just nut jobs and kooks and cranks, etc.
And sometimes iconoclasts.
Sometimes. But Corey Good, he's him and his buddy David Wilcock. I don't know, they seem like a couple of fucking shysters right out the gate. My buddy was like, that Corey Good's got a crazy story, man. But I wouldn't let him anywhere near my fucking kid. And if you see his face, it's like, yeah, I can kind of agree with that.
It's just so weird to me that, like...
But he's like trying to say he told the story first, that he was abducted as a child by the government or the secret space program and put through a whole fucking training montage and sent to fucking Mars or wherever and fought reptilians, etc. Basically a whole fucking Isaac Asimov novel that he lived.
And then was basically quoting John Carter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he was put back in his body and lived the rest of his life normally due to, I don't know, soul removal and transplantation into clones or some shit. I don't know. But I don't even know if he's the first person to do that. Well, I know he's not. The idea of the secret space program has been around for a long time. And technically, you could kind of trace it to, like, the mystery airships of the fucking late 1800s, really, if you want to go with the whole breakaway civilization angle on it. But there's tons of fucking other secret space program abductees and quote-unquote super soldiers and space soldiers who are telling the same story. And once they started telling their stories and being invited on TV, or, you know, maybe not TV shows. Shows, radio, anything that pays, basically.
Yeah.
He probably got a fucking hair up his ass crossways and was like, I should be the one. I'm the secret space soldier. If you have Tubi, I think, they have a lot of fairly decent conspiracy/ufology documentaries. And he shows up in a couple. Those are the bad ones. There's better ones. There's a lot with Linda Moulton Howe that are worth checking out. he's basically saying in that deposition, like, this happened to me in my mind. And, for years he's been touting it as something that actually happened to him. But anyways, I digress. Back to infield poltergeist. Holy shit. So I heard a story about the infield poltergeist. The girl who was basically, if anyone out there is familiar with sort of instances of poltergeist hauntings and research into it, most of the time you will find that a young child is the center of poltergeist hauntings, or they seem to be the either the activity's epicenter or the ghost is drawn to them, or whatever it is, the entity, whatever you want to call it. There's another sort of reoccurring theme in poltergeist cases where the child, maybe it's not a ghost, maybe the child has like latent, subdued psychokinetic abilities, and that's why shit's moving around all over the place. So there's a story attached to Janet Hodgson, the girl who is the focus of the infield poltergeist, during the time that all these various investigators and new agers and fucking quote-unquote psychics, etc., are coming around to sort of poke around the place. Some people show up from South America, a man and a woman. And not only are they from South America, but if I remember correctly, they also have blonde hair and blue eyes, which isn't usually a thing you associate with native South Americans. But anyways, they show up and they're saying, yeah, Janet, you have innate psychic abilities. You're some kind of next stage in human evolution. You need to come with us and study because you're a natural shaman, etc. And we got to hone your powers or else you'll regret it for the rest of your life.
I'm sorry, who let you into my house?
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to find like background on who the fuck these people supposedly were, because apparently there's a fucking Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters slash Colonia Dignidad somewhere in the fucking middle of South America that's collecting psychic children from around the world. Yeah, it's a weird sort of side story into the whole infield poltergeist thing. It's in my, man, I have like a stack of various research platforms I'm jumping off of here and there, but I'm still pursuing that one. The main source for much of what we'll be discussing today concerning Dr. Dee, my main source was a book that I read called John Dee and the Empire of Angels by Jason Louv. I think that's how you pronounce it. Louv. Anyways, good book. Awesome book. There's several chapters that sort of elucidate upon the career trajectory into occultism that Dr. Dee took. He sort of exhausted all his options as far as academia goes. He was looking to obtain more knowledge, get smarter, etc. So they had a whole outline of the occult studies that he pursued later on in life. And there's a lot of basic rundowns that explain magic. And one of the sort of root ideas behind a lot of stuff, specifically things like voodoo dolls or curses, things like that, is the idea of magical contagion, or the law of contagion and the law of similarities or something like that. But it's basically how using a voodoo doll can, you get like a hair sample, fingernail, whatever, put it in a little wax puppet, and because it's got a sample of the person you want to do whatever to, it's all about using like replacements and simulacras, basically. So I'm sitting there and I keep getting these weird pop-ups on my computer for some social media thing, or it's not Facebook, it's like one of the grams, something like that. Anyways, so all of a sudden I had a fucking wire crossways in my brain, and I was thinking, man, social media is technically a digital voodoo doll of every person that uses it, because it's a false representation, a simulacra, if you will. So I'm wondering if you could use sympathetic magic. That's what it's called. If you could apply duress or, I don't know, strange stress factors upon someone's digital self if it could be used in that same manner. Because if so, Facebook is a far more evil corporation than we could ever imagine.
Well, yeah. Welcome to the party.
Oh, shit.
I hate even having to be adjacent to it.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. Digital simulacras, man. It was a weird, I don't know, brain fart I had that, and there'll be more, because, except they'll probably be cooler than that. I can't wait to explain my reasoning behind outer space gangster alchemy later on.
Outer space, gangster alchemy, and more after this smoke break. So without further ado, we bring you the generic details of John Dee. Thank you. So John Dee was born the 13th of July, 1527, and died roughly around 1609. We know this much because his journal entry still had stuff in 1608. So, there you go. Not only was he an English mathematician, astronomer, astrologer, teacher, occultist, and alchemist, he was also real tight with Elizabeth I, one of the greater Tudor monarchs to ever do anything because, you know, she defended England from the Spanish Armada. I mean, not her personally, but, you know, I didn't see her manning any ships or anything. But anyways.
You know, they called her the Fairy Queen, not to be confused with the Dairy Queen, but it was due to her sort of tolerance of, I won't go as far to say magic.
Non-standard life?
Yeah, very much. Total polar opposite of her sister.
Yes, Bloody Mary was actually quite the bitch. When she was the ruling monarch after her brother died, Edward, she actually kept John Dee under house arrest because she didn't quite like the cut of his jib.
Right.
And she's like, But under house arrest, Elizabeth would come visit him, and she was very enthralled and just thought he had a lot to offer, you know?
She herself was very interested in occult ideas, etc., which kind of helped out Dr. Dee, Doctor quote-unquote, kind of early on in the game. But, you know, once again, this is a strange time to be openly consorting with spirits, etc., and things like that.
So to just be fair, back in the day, if you knew any kind of real mathematics, like, you know, pi or rise over run, stuff like that, any kind of Pythagorean theorem, you are in league with the devil, because if you are conjuring up numbers out of other numbers that aren't numbers that they need to get stuff for shipping and receiving, then you are a fucking demon, or at least you're in league with them. Please tell me and explain to me why this math is important, or we're going to burn you at the stake. And this is a phrase he heard quite a bit over his lifetime.
Oh, yeah.
And being a Protestant inside of a religious civil war,
all that was going on,
was pretty goddamn terrible.
Plus, I figure most royals, like, the only math they really needed to know was how to calculate the tip, if they tipped.
I mean, when's the last royal you've seen leave a tip?
Well, I only had soup. I don't see why I have to.
That's why going Dutch is being, like, republic about it, you know? Anyways, so he used to do a lot of work for Queen Elizabeth, and, you know, they would There's even rumors that he was sent overseas to mainland Europe to go investigate what's going on with the other courts to find intrigues and mysteries and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Occult espionage. Like, for real. I love this shit all throughout history, anytime it happens. Also, I didn't know this, but John Dee was a contemporary of Nostradamus. And Nostradamus was essentially his French counterpart. And supposedly, the prophecies of Nostradamus were sort of inspired by the powers that be in France in order to sort of foment certain ideas in people's heads. So this is exactly what I'm kind of talking about when I say things like occult espionage, because it's just a weird crossover history of like occultism and intelligence agencies and basically criminal underworlds. They all sort of congregate in this weird, smoky, hazy milieu.
Clearly a man ahead of his time.
Yeah.
So how does one such as John Dee get in bed court with the Tudors? Well, you start with King Henry VIII. He's actually part of that court. He got to go to school, St. John's College, and before that it was actually Chelmsford Chantry School, now King Edward VI Grammar School, from 1535 to 1542. And then he entered St. John's College in Cambridge in 1542 at 15, graduating early because, you know, he's the Ted Kaczynski of the 1500s.
Yeah, we got that, right?
I think we did.
Okay. Yeah,
And,
bit of a child prodigy, so to speak.
and so, you know, school really isn't for commoners. So it's probably a good idea if you have like a...
Yeah, you can't have the lower classes knowing how to read and write and things like that.
This is correct. So it's probably a good idea if you have what I like to call a flow chart of genetics. And John Dee claimed to be descended from Rory the Great, the 9th century ruler of Gwynedd, which is a little region of Wales that was a very big fucking stronghold. It was like one of the last places to be conquered. Super fucking baller. Anyways,
Yeah.
even the fact that he's related to any of those.
And
really-
Wales is a very much associated with pre-Christian, pagan times. I mean, there's still plenty of... that's where you get a lot of associations with things like ley lines and standing stones and pre-pagan...
Lots of
sort
holdover from the Gauls and the Celts. And
Yeah.
they're one of the few places...
Ritual landscapes and things like that.
They're one of the few places left in the world where Welsh is still the predominant first language, and you can. It's the closest to understanding the Gaelic language that you're ever going to get, besides Ireland or little patches of Scotland or Brittany or Castile. There's like little enclaves, but being one of those guys, you know, you already come from a land of mystery, which is gonna really just make Queen Elizabeth's
Chair wet?
Yeah. We need a...
Look at him. He runs like a Welshman, doesn't he? Doesn't he run like a Welshman?
I do believe he's also said on more than one occasion that he is or believes himself to be the reincarnation of not quite Merlin, but I believe it's pronounced Murden, who is the sort of real life basis. Merlin Ambrosius was a Welsh. What were those guys called? Druid.
Yes.
Yeah. Druid priest who sort of was swept up into the original historical basis behind much of the King Arthur Grail mythology, things like that. So, yeah.
But see, what really pissed people off, it's not safe to be smart, as Copernicus taught us in these days. You have these outlandish ideas about, you know, the way the world works outside of the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And then, once again, you're going to hear this a lot, he's a witch.
Yeah.
But he did something a little bit more mundane. I mean, all in all, it's still very cool, but when he was in college, as we all do, we kind of have a little fun with it.
Yeah.
And he was...
Who hasn't experimented with a little bit of optics in their college years, you know?
Having a little fun with it. And he was in a play. And, you know, we won't hold that against him. But, you know, at Trinity, a very clever stage effect where he was riding a scarab, and he made the scarab look like it was gonna fly with strings and air pistons and little simple tricks to make it look really cool. Everyone screamed, "He's a witch!"
Yeah,
because
that's where that albatross throughout his life started. Even
And-
though basically it's sort of a lost technology, because if you look at old school Greek and Roman plays and stagecraft, that's where the phrase Deus Ex Machina comes from. Anytime like you had the intervention of gods basically in the play, as long as they weren't being actually played by an actor, then there were certain stagecraft and special effects that they had even back then that were sort of like primitive precursors to things like animatronics.
Yeah,
like old school Chuck E. Cheese, Mr. Munch and the Funtime Band or whatever they're called.
You know what the first use of the primitive steam engine was for?
What?
It was to animate beings inside of Greek temples.
Whoa.
You put your money in there or your offering,
Yeah?
and then they would fucking stoke a fire out of sight under the thing, and then it would heat up the water, boil, and it would make it move.
Crazy.
And
didn't know that.
yeah, that's been around for a long time. And even like this, just simple stuff like this was
From what I know of many temples also, I bet all those people were fucking high out of their minds.
yes,
Um,
puffing volcano gas.
Yeah,
Weirdos.
somewhere down the line, we're gonna probably do an episode that sort of goes into more of these pre-medieval, ancient versions of automatons and chess-playing robots, quote unquote, things like that. There's actually quite a bit more to it than you'd think at first.
What play, you ask? You're probably asking yourself, well, what really weird play was this where he made everything look good? Well, that was Aristophanes' Peace. And
Peace.
it comes up later because you know how if he's this good at special effects, maybe, just maybe, he should take it to the globe.
Oh,
But more on
yeah.
that later. After he graduated, he ended up going around touring Europe, just seeing stuff, just trying to find myself. And he started going to, he
Did some
traveled.
things, saw some stuff.
Yeah.
Wouldn't recommend it.
So he went to mainland Europe and went to Brussels and lectured there for a while. And then he started lecturing in Paris on Euclid, the little godfather of geometry and logic, stuff that people really should learn. But,
The guy who basically set the foundations for geometry. The only reason I know Euclid's name is because of H.P. Lovecraft, because he would constantly mention non-Euclidean geometry. So, like, anytime...
what a fun word to say.
Yeah, anytime someone, wandered into fucking multi-dimensional weirdness portal or, deep underground in Antarctica, and then they'd fucking stumble across the ancient alien grave city, they'd be like, oh, the Cyclopean anti-Euclidean geometry. It's freaking out my mind, man.
So-
the angles aren't right.
So also, in the years around college, he also took courses that, you're never going to use when you get out, cartography.
Never
and-
say never.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many cartographers there are in our audience, in our listening audience, but
Yeah, actually, his...
good for you for doing that.
His mentor through much of his study of cartography was the popular Gerardus Mercator, where we get the term Mercator. He was basically not just a student, but a...
Oh, mentor.
Yes,
And-
mentor and mentee.
And a teacher's aide. He was a TA.
Yeah.
So while on the continent, he picks up a ton of like cool shit, like astrolabes and mathematical equipment, so you can study like the measurements of the movements of stars and all this. And
Yeah, the stuff he like learned amongst the continent and some of the like gadgetry he collected and some of which he invented himself as well. When he goes back home to England, it kind of shows that at that time England seemed kind of fucking the boonies, sort of, compared to everything else that was going on the continent. From what I read, I don't know, people were like constantly even his technology, like people were like, "Oh, he pushed a button. The devil's in that machine." I don't know, just it was strange. He was like and because his I was gonna say with Mercator, his studies, he was one of the first people to make maps that didn't have monsters in the corner and say here there be dragons and shit like that. He was like, no, it's a real fucking map, moron.
Yeah. It's like this one part down here. It just says, "Don't go here."
Yeah.
Douchebags be on this point. Because you got kicked out of one bar. No, so in 1552, him and a bunch of his, for lack of a better term, cronies, math cronies. I am math man.
Oh, man.
Landed back in England, and they actually were investigating a perpetual motion machine.
From freaky theater kids to math gangsters.
to math gangsters.
Math thugs.
With their hats all got tassels on one side.
with their hats cocked to 46-degree angles.
Yeah.
Specifically 46.
So weird. Dee was offered a readership in mathematics at the Oxford University in 1554, upon which he declined, citing offensive English university's emphasis on rhetoric and grammar, which, you can do whatever you want as long as, you teach these kids how to be English and how to speak it. That's all we really care about. You can fake it till you make it with anything else.
Wait, what was the objection?
He rejected it, citing the university's emphasis on rhetoric and grammar.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think this falls into his being a adherent of Neoplatonism, which I believe that covered, like, you have the triumvirate and then, like, the quadrennium or something like that, and then
the academic trivium.
Yeah, trivium. So different systems are attributed to different teachers and teach different subjects.
It's almost like he was like, "Look, guys, I know I have an arts degree, okay, but I'm not teaching that shit. That's
a liberal arts degree.
That is single-handedly ruining the British Empire." It's almost like Dad saying, "What do you want a degree in art for?" Hey, I'll make some art. Look, I don't need a degree.
I just got my BA in interpretive dance. You should come to my show.
He advocated for the quadrennium.
That's the one.
Yeah, composed mainly of geometry, music, astronomy, and arithmetic. Arithmetic? That's it. That's the ticket. He really hoped for a better position in or at court. So he told them, if you guys change your curriculum, then I'll join. But until then, no, I'm good.
Yeah, he felt certain subjects were more pertinent and should be taught above others.
1555, he joined the Worshipful Company of Mercers, as his father had, and because it's what you do in England, I guess.
What your dad did?
Yeah, you just do what your dad did. That would make us,
as long as it's not your mom.
Yeah, that would make you Oedipus Rex.
Also, a play that he maybe was involved with.
That same year, 1555, Dee was arrested for drunken disorderly conduct. No, he was arrested and charged with the crime of calculating.
You're the transitive property of associated Pythagoras. Did you feed me in the jail, in the dungeon?
X equals MXB plus Y.
I saw that too. I thought it was very strange that they specifically used the term calculating to mean some kind of magical operation.
It almost seems like it's a code name for conspiracy.
Well,
no, it's just calculating.
I think they were saying that he was sort of using it in a conspiratorial nature. That I think was part of the charge.
He'd been casting horoscopes of Queen Mary and Princess Elizabeth. He's like, Princess Elizabeth's gonna be super hot today.
He had one of those like folded up paper things, like you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
the little pyramid thing. Pick a color.
Yeah,
blue. Okay, BLUE.
Pick up M.
You're not gonna have any sons and get killed because of it. I'm sorry. It's not me. It's the paper thing. It's the Oracle speaks.
See, and then since Mary got a bad horoscope, she raised the charges to treason.
Yeah,
which is considered treason, and he didn't like it, obviously, and he was pretty bummed out. And
Yep, had to spend some time at the Tower of London Super 8 Motel, I believe, for a while there.
so how does one get out of being charged with treason for writing a horoscope that's bullshit to begin with in the first place? He appeared in the quote-unquote Star Chamber and exonerated himself, but he was turned over to a Catholic bishop, one Edmund Bonner, for religious examination. His strong, lifelong penchant for sorcery may have made matters worse because
shit, they turned him over to Reverend Boner.
Oh man,
Fuck, that's like worse than being in the dungeon, man.
I'd rather be in the Tower of London than hanging out with Edmund Boner.
No, I think Eddie Boner ended up being one of his sort of inadvertent also mentor.
Well, see, here's where it gets a little bit crazier. You're sent to get, for lack of a better term, an inquisition from Edmund Bonner.
Mm-hmm.
And
he was a agent of the church.
yeah, and since she's Catholic, and you're gonna get an inquisition.
Oh,
And-
by the way, if we didn't mention it before, yeah, the whole Catholic Protestant thing, aka the Troubles, they go way back. Kind of start around this time, actually.
So during the Inquisition,
Reoccurring theme.
they found out that they actually have a lot in common and became really good friends, and they soon became close associates. He was, you guessed it, exonerated.
Hey, go Johnny boy.
So
These nuts.
yeah, these nuts are fucking free to go. Dee presented Queen Mary in 1556 with a visionary plan for preserving old books, manuscripts, records, anything found that was disappearing because, weird thing about books being burnt off or sold to the mainland because
the whole, concept and idea of the preservation of knowledge that is, I believe this is pre-printing press. It's a little harder to, keep up with, well, not supply and demand, but just keeping a track of what we know that we know.
So John Dee made it a point that we should probably have like a really good library because we never know what information we're going to need later in the future, and it might be good to have that at a moment's notice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
brilliant idea.
I'm yours within an hour's warning is a letter that he sent off to people before. He ended up creating one of the largest private libraries possibly in the world. I've heard it from multiple GD sources.
Yeah, I heard that as well.
But then they said there was like 400 books. I'm like, what? 400 books?
Oh, no.
I have 400 books in my fucking library, and it's like what is that?
I think at this time it was around that many, but he would eventually have one of the biggest libraries in...
I believe it's pronounced library.
Sorry, yeah, that's where the lies are buried.
Yeah.
In all of Europa. But at the same time, it is good to see that some things never change, like willful ignorance foisted upon the people by the powers that be.
So
sorry, I didn't mean to get political.
It's all right.
This happened a couple times.
This library got so big that it actually attracted people because they had to just see. Because, I've never seen that many books together in one spot before. I heard they're going to have more than two. It's really, I can't even count that high. Well, let's go check it out.
2 books? Man, we could go there.
Dude, we could be there for a week.
Yeah, because there's fucking nothing else to do except, I don't know, farm and die of disease. But 2 books, man, think about it. We could, get one book in one hand and one book in another hand and be like, well, I'm the red book. Well, I'm the blue book. Make them fight. Oh, man. We could spend hours doing that.
Stop staring at me, book. Reading me. So
book fight.
So everybody really enjoyed that. Finally, we get to where some subversive statecraft begins to happen because Queen Elizabeth takes the throne, and as we all know, Queen Elizabeth is actually a man.
Was she?
There's a rumor.
Now, when you say she was actually a man...
That Elizabeth died and she was replaced by a man that dressed up like Elizabeth, and she kept it secret for her entire reign, which seems pretty undoable.
Kind of like Pope Joan.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to ask if it was a situation like that, or if it was sort of like a Jamie Lee Curtis urban legend kind of type deal.
It was kind of like Bosom Buddies, but with a English throne.
They should bring that show back.
They should. It was pretty hilarious.
Yeah, I think it would fly over real well today.
Yeah, maybe just a little bit. So Elizabeth, being a huge fan of John Dee to begin with, because she'd go by the house and check on him and bring him casseroles. And when his wife died, she went over there and they had a very private conversation that lasted a long time. And they're just cool with each other.
Do you have his first wife's name handy?
I believe it is. I want to say Catherine Constable was the first.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, she died of disease or some kind there.
Cool.
Yeah. They don't talk about it very much in most of his biographical information. I guess, he married young, and, she passed on, and we'll have another lady come along.
Well, if there was one thing he liked to do,
quite a ways down the road,
making kids. So Elizabeth takes the throne in allegedly 1558. Sorry for making jokes about Queen Elizabeth, but this is that show.
Yeah.
He became the court astrologer and scientific advisor, which is a very important role because, you know stuff.
Yeah. He put the ass in astrologer.
He even chose her coronation date.
He was very chaste, actually. Sorry, go ahead.
He was so tight with Queen Elizabeth, he actually chose her coronation date and even became a Protestant, according to how tight their relationship was. Kind of get the feeling like this dude is like M. Or no, not M. Who is it in James Bond? That's the dude that's got like, check out this super nifty tool. What is it? Q.
Yeah.
What is it? Is it a flashlight? No. It's a flashlight. It's a torch. Like, what?
It's literally a torch and a flashlight.
Look, I even got you a backpack stenographer.
You see this? I call it fake ear. So when your real ear falls off, you just put it right there.
It's called
no
silly
one's
wax.
The wiser. Does it have like special hearing abilities or nope? It's an ear to replace any ears you might lose about the process of your day living in horrible times in history.
So he served as an advisor to England's voyages of discovery and providing technical aid and navigation and political support for creating the British Empire. But before we go any further with that, what I want to say about this guy is he was the guy that actually come up with some pretty sweet new navigational techniques and how to restructure not only shipping in general, but the British Navy and the whole concept or doctrine for the future. And this would come in handy because, as we all know, King Philip II of Spain, who talked like real, yeah.
I went from Henry Kissinger to, I don't know, a Chihuahua maybe? I don't know. Yeah, his time spent studying under Mercator and his cartography skills, as well as his acumen for invention combined, and he was able to create quite a few new methodologies and gimmicks to be used in navigating ships.
There was even a ongoing trade between him and
Mercator.
Mercator, yeah, thank you. There's actually a ongoing trade between Dee and Mercator to who could produce the most eloquent globe.
Really?
Yeah, they would actually make them and remap everything, and then
when did they find out the world was round after Columbus?
Like 300 BC.
Yeah, but then they all forgot because religion or something.
Yeah, they got mind wiped. No, they actually.
Are we talking about now? Sorry, there's a lot of parallels with this story and things that, well, and some are quite overt that I'll get into later. Sorry.
So between them doing this, like he even had a globe that mapped the night sky of the stars, and that became very popular. So that became part of the, I guess I wouldn't say acumen, but part of the structure of the new navigational techniques.
Mm-hmm.
even the concept of, look, if you want this thing to keep going, people want a piece of us, and we're an island nation. We need to have a massive fleet, and it needs to be standardized, and everybody needs to be proficient at their job, because this will defend us. And that tool and that naval doctrine was what ended up causing mass expansion across the globe.
And the stratagems too that he came up with, like he was basically like the John Madden of naval exploration and battle.
Boom, right there over there.
Yeah.
You got a big old circle with an X next to the guy.
You got a dirty jersey. Yeah, and he would work hand in hand with Sir Francis Drake and Queen Elizabeth, all the three of them together, a triumvirate of the wills, which basically set the outline for what would become the naval power that essentially built the British Empire. England,
Yes.
because I know that Britain was like the idealized that they strived to. It was like their mythical, ideal, future perfected self or whatever. So, but England at the time, yeah, they're a tiny island.
Well, they were already late to the party because the Spaniards had already gotten over to the Americas.
Yeah.
And a little bit of background history lesson here. Mary, Queen of Scots, her sister, was still kicking it, and there was a bit of an attempted coup between her and Philip II of Spain, who she married upon the contingent that he would help take back the throne and make England Catholic.
Yep.
And
But she had to have a Spanish baby
A
with
babby.
him, which didn't work out.
yes.
And so everything reverted back to Elizabeth.
Her
I'm trying
claim-
to remember a few other tidbits about the historical context of this because there's certain things that will come into play later. I
So-
do know that this is before the official creation of the telescope and the microscope.
So how did they defeat the Spanish Navy? Well, nature took out half of it on its own. That was good.
Yeah,
And
and that really fed their whole like, see, God likes us.
And I think, look, we got to take this win and parlay it into something better. So the English used fire ships to set their shit on fire, or to set the Spaniards' stuff on fire. And on top of that, Spain, being Spain, said, fuck it, hurl a bunch of shit at them. So all these ships had no standardization of cannonball or cannon. So there was no telling who had what. And if one ship ran out of something, they had to go find another ship with that same stuff.
Here's something that I wanted to ask you about. Is I know they have cannons at this time, so they obviously have gunpowder.
See,
Do they have pistols at this time?
yes.
Okay, because I know that it wasn't until the creation of the Royal Society, as well as all that Oliver Cromwell shit going on later, that's when they started. I know for a fact that that's when they started mass producing gunpowder because it was made with piss and shit, and they had these guys called gong men who would go like into the sewers and steal shit or like collect buckets of piss from people.
Yeah, to make the phosphorus in there.
Mhm.
But you got to remember manufacturing. You saw a lot of like pikemen, levymen still, because it's hard to outfit an entire army with something that's not mass produced yet. Like the technology was there, it just the production means just weren't there yet.
Right.
So you'd see some guys there or whatever, and you can mass produce the gunpowder. But
This was the day of the blunderbuss.
Game of Thrones actually stole from history.
I fucked a dragon.
They actually stole.
Hadn't seen a single episode, but I'm pretty sure I know what's going on.
That whole incest with the dragons and the talking and the blonde hair, blue eyed people that are doing all the evil stuff. Yeah, that one. But there was actually a plot to kill, I think it was James the First, when they were going to plant a bunch of gunpowder underneath his.
Oh,
court.
yeah. The Guy Fawkes Day
Yeah.
thing. V for Vendetta.
Yeah. And it didn't work.
Nope.
It actually.
And I was reading about that earlier too, and it's kind of weird that mask, that Guy Fawkes mask, is so iconic now. Yet at the same time, Guy Fawkes was a religious terrorist.
I did not
essentially.
know that.
So yeah, I mean his grievances all boil down to, Protestant versus Catholic
Oh, okay.
stuff. I was gonna say another word, but very nuanced and complicated.
Yes. We got to be subtle on this show.
Yeah. Kind of like things going on elsewhere in the world today.
And another thing. No,
Yeah, the fact that they were relying upon Sir Francis Drake, well, not Sir yet, but he was a privateer, so he also gave England plausible deniability for any, they'd just be like, hey, why don't you, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, get out there.
while you're out there.
Yeah, get out there and shuck some fit up for us. And they actually gave him a bunch of ships for one mission, and ended up like he was the only one left. And because of this, I don't know what his ship was originally called, but he changed the ship's name to the Golden Hind, which I believe translates into modern day as the Golden Ass. I mean, I don't know.
It's quite possible.
I figured he like renamed it because he was lucky that he was the only one left. But yeah, he did a lot of fucking damage. John Dee also, it wasn't just the naval capabilities and stratagems and, inventions and navigation and cartography, etc. He was also the guy who basically set up intelligence agencies as we know them today. This was like the birth of espionage as a sort of more widespread tool in international intrigue. And because of his various studies, specifically in mathematics and occultism, he was also very well versed in cryptography, which also played a huge part in early espionage and intelligence agencies and gathering and code breaking, etc.
He had a code name. What was that again? We said it once before in an episode a while back. I can't remember what it was, though.
I think it was Usvin.
007. And he wasn't the only guy in Queen Elizabeth's court to have a code name.
My name is James Bond. James Bond.
I did that joke last time, but
Yeah.
I really like it.
It's a funny joke. In fact, Edward de Vere, the
He's
Duke of
the-
Oxford,
Okay.
was also in the service of Elizabeth's court.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And he had a code name too, but his was like TT and stuff like that. Like they all had like really weird shorthand for everything. So that way the correspondence, if it was ever intercepted during any kind of clandestine shit, they wouldn't really be able to track it down. But you could look at the context clues in there. If according to this one gentleman that's very, very much into numerology,
Sparrowhawk to titmouse. Sparrowhawk to titmouse. Come in, titmouse.
hey, we got a problem over here. Over. You don't have to do the every time.
Stop making that noise. I'm standing right next to you.
Look up, over here.
Do you need a lozenge?
Y'all hear that fucking bird?
Being that England didn't really, have a lot to their military might at the time, it's these sort of thinking outside the box strategies using intelligence and espionage and more complex navigational and naval firepower, etc., that helped also establish their foothold as the empire upon which the sun never sets.
Now we're going to get into the really fun stuff because, traveling across Europe and all that to get money and meet people and do stuff, that's a pretty big part of this too.
Dee, in his relation to the building of the British Empire, was allegedly, and I'm going to lean towards this is probably actually the case, quote-unquote, divinely inspired, seeing as how he was a very pious man. In fact, every time he was, levied with allegations of being a quote-unquote sorcerer or what have you, a conjurer, I believe was the word they used mostly, he was constantly reminding everyone, like, yeah, but I'm like a sorcerer for God. I'm like on a mission from God. But yes, he was divinely inspired to form what will eventually become the British Navy, as well as a vast majority of top secret methods of navigation, trade, and stratagem, which would ultimately prove to be the method through which the then entirely speculative and so far purely conceptual British Empire might one day raise itself to the level of a global superpower. Also, in addition to this, He was of the opinion that no less a personage than King Arthur had already previously settled in the New World, thus inferring that England essentially had more right to it than anyone else.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And Elizabeth, of course, being the queen, she's obviously of that lineage,
Well,
I guess, by this reasoning. And that he was she was either a descendant and or a reincarnation of King Arthur, and he was Merlin. Both things.
Merlin.
Yeah. Either that or he was capitalizing on their sort of national mythology to provide a foundation, more or less, for the idea of the British Empire.
Well, you do need to have some kind of unifying thing here, because don't forget, one, the Tudor reign came out of a civil war, and there's also a big religious war. So let's get some of these fucking weirdos to the New World, where it's their problem, not ours.
Yeah.
Kind of like Ulysses S. Grant was like, they found gold in the Black Hills. I want you guys to start sending some of these Civil War vets out there. But, sir, we have a treaty with them. We can't go out there. Oh, yeah, no, rip that up. Send them out there for the gold.
We do not honor treaties or capitulate to terrorist demands, which are essentially treaties with mouths. Plus, we're better than them.
Was their reasoning, I suppose.
America doesn't, we're a young nation, and we don't really have much of our own mythology. I mean, we do. We have folklore and legends, etc. Yeah. I would say that the only really quintessential sort of American mythology is basically cowboys and Indians. Yeah. And half of that is really sad and horrible. But I will say at the same time, maybe the reason that things are continuously fairly fucked up here is because our entire country was built on an Indian graveyard.
That is the most reasonable argument I have ever heard in regards for why America is so effed up. It's almost like the curse of Sarah Winchester befell all of America.
Yeah.
That's why we keep building random doors into nowhere and windows that open into the fucking floorboard.
Turning vast swaths of ecosystems into
shopping malls.
Yeah, parking lots.
And dildos falling out the walls.
Cake toppers, please.
Excuse me. I forgot how that song goes. Shopping malls coming out of the walls, and the
walls in the mall are totally tall. Dee was not only an intelligence agent, but he also happened to be something of a proto-paranormal investigator.
Ectoplasm.
Residual. Just not a very good one.
Is this where he met the crystal gazer?
Not quite yet, because Lizzie, was like, hey, you do my horoscopes for me, and you know all about this weird shit. So can you kind of, check on that or whatever? And he had plus, you got to look at sort of in the context of the time that Protestantism is a new thing. And forever and ever and ever, as far as people were concerned, the church dictated reality. You have, who was before Rudolph? Frederick, Holy Roman Empire, right?
Yeah.
So you have the political side and the religious side, and they're the ones who sort of have dictated forever what reality is. And now that Protestantism has sort of split off, it's creating this overall impending sense of unease and uncertainty, we'll say. And it really got to people. And I don't have to tell you, obviously. I mean, I think we've even talked about this on the show on multiple occasions, how often doomsday prophecies fail. But yeah, there was a whole bunch of those fucking floating around at the time. In the height of this, because Dee was sort of entrenched in all these occult learnings and espionage as well, and sort of into, occultism and cryptography, there was a weird sort of unspoken green light given to certain agents of the Vatican who were sort of given special dispensation to fuck around with magic if they were using it against Queen Elizabeth and the Protestants, like the Protestant power structure. Before Dee got into the really crazy shit, like in the meantime of planning all the armadas and whatnot, building the empire, he had this like reoccurring enemy who was another sorcerer, quote unquote. He was just a fucking reoccurring pain in the ass, this guy.
This pretty much the part where he starts talking about the crystal gazers and what he can learn from them, because, you know, this is the part where we meet Mr. Kelly now. And,
or is it Mr. Talbot?
He introduced himself as Too Tall Talbot, but his real name was Edward Kelly.
Edward Talbot was the name on his student register, I believe. That's where that came from. Dee was not psychically inclined, which is a gift that he required in working much of his various occult formulae and operations.
He didn't hit 65% on the cards when you flip them over, like in the psychic episode.
I don't know, some squiggly lines.
Bzzah! Stop it! He could do everything else, basically. He knew the technical aspects, but he just didn't have the knack. And he was working with various scryers through the years. There was a fellow named Hickman, another guy named Barnabas Saul. For a while, later on in life, there were people who were sort of sent to him by agencies unknown to act as his scryer, but he kind of got a weird, like, funky spider sense feeling about him on occasion. It was like, I don't know you. Where did you come from? Did you answer an ad in the paper? And
hey, there's no bus to Jersey City.
Yeah.
What? I never even told you my first name.
Australia, beautiful. Yeah, he kind of, you know, being also an intelligence agent, he had to like watch out for shit like this, because obviously if the Catholic Church found out some of the shit he was up to, even if it's sanctioned under Queen Elizabeth, that'd be even worse, actually. So that's why, like I said earlier, you know, criminality, espionage, occultism, all this stuff sort of blends together. But eventually, yes, he would meet a man by the name of Edward Kelly. Edward Kelly was a bit of a fucking scumbag. Well, no, that's not fair. He may have had mental issues. He may have been a drug user. It may have been a little of all these things. Possibly a con man. But, see, there are complications to that theory as well that we'll get into later. But the thing about Edward Kelly, upon first meeting him, one of the things that people usually noticed was that he wore a special cap that covered his ears, because apparently one of the punishments for the crime of fraud and forgery was having the tops of your ears snipped off. And so he wore this special hat that like covered his ears so people wouldn't know that he'd been punished by the law for fraud and forgery. So, I mean, he basically...
This hat comes right off. He's a phony.
Hello? Sorry. He basically had a fucking tell already that he had been up to no good and was a bit of a criminal. But at the same time, from what I understand of scryers around this time, they were sort of viewed on the job scale as somewhere between prostitute and janitor. Like, just about anyone could do it, and they were usually of the lower social stratas. And Edward Kelly specifically was, as author Jason Louv puts it in John Dee and the Empire of Angels, somewhat equivalent to, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but somewhat equivalent to someone today like Miss Cleo, essentially. You know, 1976 psychic. Like, that was how people basically viewed him. The Saul Goodman of scryers and psychics, if you will. But he knew his shit. He had abilities, and he eventually kind of got his way into working with Dee, and they formed a very strange, very strained, very equally traumatic to each other and from outside sources, as we'll see. They're just two men who I think had very different goals and reasons for trying to attain these goals. But due to shared traumas and various other strange happenings that they would encounter and live through together, they did develop a bond of sorts, but it would be tumultuous at best. There are several explanatory theories for the spirit actions. After Kelly kind of like proved his ability to Dee, they would soon begin embarking upon essentially an endeavor which Dee had sort of had this stuff like in the back pocket as far as certain occult ideas. And at this time, alchemy was a big thing. We've discussed several alchemists, and as you may remember, they too are at this time quite synonymous with con men.
And harvesting pee.
Yeah, there's that too. The whole idea of alchemy and certain occult practices, as well as angel magic or angel conjuring, talking to demons and or spirits and or angels. At least that's what, their specific worldview and mind frame filtered these beings through as. And some of these beings have no problem playing that role. A lot of times in spiritualists, like I think when we covered them, I don't know if we mentioned it or not, but there are all these methods to see if a dead loved one is really a dead loved one, because apparently the elemental spirits and various discarnate entities, they love to pretend to be your dead loved one. Another thing that they are notoriously well known for is lying a lot. So you have to have all these like checks and balances and special measures basically to verify who the fuck these things are, what they are that you're talking to. It's not just someone wearing your dead aunt's face or something on the wing. Including alchemy and sort of trafficking with spirits and communication with spirits. These were both practices that Dee would eventually sort of fairly well become familiarized with. There was another practice at this time that would really play into his overall sort of occult workings, and that is known as Kabbalah. I don't know if we've gone into length on it before, but basically it's an ancient Judaical magical system where basically every letter or word has a numerical value, and you can sort of create sentences or words out of letters and achieve different numerical values with one word and find a correspondence with another word that has the same numerical value. So you're sort of finding all these weird magical links, basically. And there are also concepts on what is called the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, which is basically a map of the emanation of God down into physical reality, or it could be backwards. It could be man ascending to godhood, depending on which way you're climbing the ladder of Jacob. Anyways, so there's all these like stations on the Tree of Life called Sephiroth, and they each have correspondences. So, say for instance, planet Venus, associated with the goddess Aphrodite, associated with the emotion of love, associated with roses, associated with the color red. Wait, I don't know if that's right. Maybe it's purple. I don't know all of them.
Venereal disease.
Yeah, the venereal arts. There's a whole vast table of correspondences set up that sort of allow... It's sort of like a cheat sheet / multiplication table for sorcerers and conjurers and occultists to sort of have this ingrained into your head and like build these connections up. So this is another huge like component of the magic that was being worked at that time. The whole idea of contacting angels, as far as they were concerned, they called this, well, we call it now Enochian magic. They didn't call it that back then, but that's the name that's been ascribed to it. And that's because years later, 1946, I believe, they would find the Nag Hammadi scripts and the Book of Enoch. Enochian, as we know it today, was basically the language spoken by angels. And it was the language spoken by God when he created, well, creation. And every word basically brought things into being. All he had to do was say a word, the original word before the Tower of Babel language, basically, or before the Tower of Babel fell and fucked up everybody's language. This is what God spoke. This is what everyone spoke. Everyone could understand each other. It's basically a vast project to sort of go through all these conjurations of various angels, and basically the whole project is like a huge fucking undertaking. And also, I didn't know this, Enoch from the Bible,
Not Nookie Thompson.
no, not that one. He ended up apparently becoming the Metatron.
Really?
Yeah, I did not know that.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well,
He
glad to put a name to a voice.
yeah. He evolved or some shit and stepped up into heaven. Anyways, so yeah, this is the language that the angels spoke. It was the language that Adam and Eve spoke before they got shit canned out of Eden. And John Dee basically has this whole undertaking in mind to regather this language, rediscover it, basically. And it's going to be a intense, lengthy, complex operation. And that's why he needs a scryer, because he needs someone to essentially talk back to the angels. Back in the day, like ye old biblical times, there were ways to talk to God and the angels. Like, there was these magic rocks called like Urim and Thummim that were like radio rocks to speak to God, but they were destroyed along the way through history somehow.
That's weird.
So, yeah, they're in the Bible.
Too bad they don't have a rock library card like we do.
Yeah. There's a lot of weird pornographic images in those rock libraries, I've noticed.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah, he wants to contact the angels, but to do this, to regain the language of the angels, the first thing they're going to have to do is basically get the entire alphabet out of them. And from there, it's all like a vast, complex code-breaking situation. Like, what was that shit that Alan Turing did?
The Enigma machine?
Yeah. It's like that
Like
times
cracking?
a billion. Because it's like outer space, angel, higher dimensional entities, etc. Non-physical space intelligences.
Space.
He needs a scryer because basically D is going to play the part of the guy who calls upon God. He like makes the prayers. He does all the capitulation and the rituals to fucking like call them down basically. But he needs a scryer to act as the, I guess D would be the transmitter and Kelly would play the receiver, if that makes sense. He needs Kelly to sort of interpret.
Yeah, he's the earpiece.
Yeah, he can like, he looks into a magic like crystal ball basically, and he can see the visions of the angels, and they're fucking talking to him or whatever and telling him the language, and he can sort of reinterpret it through his scrying abilities. And it was also during a lot of these operations that various weird shit would happen, because essentially once again, I mean, you know, these things say that they're angels, but
Angels don't talk like that. My Lord.
Oh, I'd say you're the devil himself. Who told you that?
sorry. He needs Kelly to basically act as the transmitter, and they've got to build this whole vast fucking language. And what's really crazy about the Enochian language, by the way, is, well, let me backtrack a little. This guy, Edward Kelly, like I said, he may be a con man. He may be mentally ill. He may really be psychic. He may just be really fucked up on drugs. Who knows? He was a bit of a bastard, that's for certain. He was a criminal, but there are several explanatory theories for how Kelly was able to ingratiate himself into this vast experimental undertaking of communicating with the other side, the higher dimensions, etc., whatever you want to call it. The first, and for the longest time, you know, most banked upon theory behind all this was Kelly was a fraud and Dee took him at face value. Jason Louv writes, the first and most obvious theory is that Kelly ran a decade-long confidence game on Dee, telling the credulous older man what he wanted to hear in exchange for a living wage. Kelly could have been combining materials he had already read with material borrowed from Dee's own library. Indeed, there are several passages in the Spirit Diaries that suggest that this is exactly what he was doing. Throughout the record, Dee writes that the angelic material reminds him of passages from Agrippa, Reuchlin, Trithemius, Abano, Pantheus, Liber Ieratus, and others, various sorcerers who've come before and basically set up magical systems. Nicholas Cluley has suggested that what Kelly was quote-unquote transmitting was really a mixture of his own imagination and passages from what he had read from Dee's shelves at Mortlake, which was Dee's house / vast personal library. It's a very Merlin-esque name for a place. The fraud theory is only supported by the infamous later incident in which Kelly convinced Dee that the angels had commanded the duo to swap wives, which must stretch the suspension of disbelief of even the most uncritical reader. Though Merritt Casaubon, basically none of this stuff was known about until this guy Merritt Casaubon later on wrote a novel that sort of recaptured the story of what was going on with these operations based on records he found of their spirit operations that were kept by Dee and Kelly. However, Casaubon thought that this was all essentially satanic, much like everyone else at the time. It was like anything magic, demons are involved. So, though Merritt Casaubon largely ignored Kelly and suggested that if Dee had been defrauded, it had been by Satan, later scholars came to the conclusion that Kelly was a bad actor and sociopathic manipulator of the credulous and vulnerable Dee. This is the standard narrative on the angelic sessions, as evidenced by the 2016 exhibition of Dee's library and spirit paraphernalia at the Royal College of Physicians in London, which held to the story that Dee was duped by Kelly. Yet, the occult author, Jeffrey James, writing around the same time as Heilbronn, suggests that it was Kelly who was the victim of Dee, held hostage at Mortlake, barely paid, and constantly pushed to perform despite teetering on the edge of psychological breakdown. Because, believe it or not, interacting and trafficking with whatever these things are doesn't exactly have the greatest effect on the human psyche. Takes a lot out of you. It seems unlikely that Kelly was able to memorize the lengthy and complex passages recorded in the spirit diaries in advance, even if there are multiple instances in the diaries where Kelly corrects something that Dee has transcribed, suggesting previous memorization. However, in retrospect, many of the complex tables that Kelly painstakingly transmitted through the scrying ball were dictated in reverse. Kelly could thus have hidden a copied table somewhere in the oratory or on his person, angled it so that it reflected into the scrying glass or crystal ball, where it would have been reversed, and then dictated it from the reflection. The fact that Kelly was essentially having to narrate a lot of these things backwards, what he was seeing, what he was being told by these entities, a lot of this falls on the fact that the order of operations and the way that he was being told this stuff and delivered it and had to speak it out loud, if he had done it in the proper order, then essentially some of these magical formulae being delivered by these beings, once you say it out loud, it's fucking Evil Dead 1 and 2. So he had to say a lot of it backwards in order to not inadvertently trip the formulae into enacting whatever it is they're supposed to do. And there are various, many operations that are included with these transmissions. However, fraudulence does not fully rule out other explanations, particularly as Kelly was entering altered states of consciousness, either through mental illness, substance use, or simply by deceiving even himself over time to the point where potent unconscious material began to surface. Though we are still left with the mathematical and linguistic complexity of the visions themselves to contend with, as they are seemingly beyond Kelly's cognitive capacity. Kelly was a bit of a dullard. A lot of these transmissions and messages that he's delivering on behalf of the angels, they do seem to have a very complex form of poetry to them. This whole language, in fact, oddly enough, has its own grammar and syntax. It's been examined by linguists, and there are certain things about it that just don't, it kind of passes the mustard, so to speak. The final elaboration of the fraud theory is that Kelly was working with an unseen third party, And this could have some merit to it. This third party, who could have been composing quote-unquote visions, perhaps written in reverse, and tables of quote-unquote angelic information, and then passing them to Kelly, who angled them so as to be out of Dee's sight, but reflected into the scrying ball, and then recited them to Dee. As Dee was so connected to the royal court and intelligence work, and England was in the middle of a Cold War, such a scenario is quite plausible. Unknown actors who had been advised to Dee's already progressing experiments with scryers could have sent Kelly to Mortlake as an agent and continued to feed him material, even via Elizabeth's court, just as a previous scryer by the name of Hickman had been pre-selected and sent to him by a former ally. The motives of such an unknown party would not be immediately obvious, although the later arrival of a gentleman by the name of Olbracht Lasky and the subsequent push for his ascendancy to power in Europe may provide a clue. Kelly himself confessed to Dee later on that he had been sent by a hidden agent to embroil Dee in occultism. Yet, for all its explanatory power, this theory still leaves the various supernatural phenomena seen and recorded by Dee himself during the actions, such as spirits that appeared in his house, and while traveling on the continent, included the incident in which Dee and Kelly claimed that they burned their records, only to have them later returned intact by a spirit. Opposed to that, you've got a second volume theory. Kelly was mentally ill, and Dee took him at face value. A related and even more tragic theory is that Kelly suffered from schizophrenia or some form of mental illness, and that Dee, lacking a modern medical perspective, took his hallucinations at face value. It would have been Dee exploiting Kelly in this scenario, not vice versa. This is born out of Kelly's alternating despondency and manic hyperactivity, his regular shifts between transfixed visionary state and hysterical meltdown, which happened quite often. His constant attempts to flee Mortlake, where they were doing these operations, his belief that he was being assaulted by invisible demons and spirits, the grandiose claims that he and Dee were to play a special role in history, and even his violent rages later on the continent. Compounding this would be that Kelly's environment, constant occult ritual, overwork by Dee, poor pay, fear of criminal prosecution for his previous actions, the looming threat of retribution from continental authorities, his abuse of alcohol, if not other substances, and his enforced isolation from a support network or a normal reality outside of Dee's private world and obsessions. Beyond that, also a wife he greatly disliked, which he was told by the angels to marry. He didn't even have a girlfriend. He was just like, the angels were like, you need to get married, bro. Like, why? Just do it. As you will see repeatedly later on, these angels are fucking psychopaths. So they would have only worsened his mental condition were that the case. Then there's, the idea Kelly was on drugs. The pharmacopoeia back then was not well known, but leave it to a sorcerer, chemist, alchemist, apothecary to have a hookup on the good shit. Let's see, outside of mentions of Kelly's alcohol abuse, there are no mentions of substances in the meticulously kept spirit diaries, possibly outside of a rarely mentioned quote-unquote alchemical red powder that Dee and Kelly spent some time hunting for. Kelly had purportedly acquired the white and red powders of projection, whatever those are.
Yeah. I think they put those in candy bars.
Yeah, I think I've done some white projection powder before. Big bag of allergies. What else? Let's see. So yeah, he had these weird alchemical powders he was trying to constantly get a hold of, along with an alchemical manual called the Book of St. Dunstan. They had, according to Kelly, been raided from a bishop's tomb by a Protestant horde and traded to an innkeeper for wine, who then sold the loot to Kelly for a guinea. I assume that's not that much. Or it's a small furry rodent. I don't know. To go far out on an unsubstantiated limb, ergot infected wheat, which many believe is
the cause of werewolves.
Yeah, or witch hunt hysteria as well, contains lysergic acid, a precursor of LSD, and creates a red powder when it is milled down. it has famously been suggested that ergot poisoning could have caused the Salem witch panic by inducing ongoing mass hallucinations in a population consuming moldy bread, although the thesis has been hotly contested. It's also at least within the realm of possibility that Kelly may have used preparations of aconite or deadly nightshade as psychedelic aid to his visions.
Or H. Preparation H.
Oh, yeah. Haran?
Well,
I think back in the day, Preparation H was probably just Haran. And you rubbed it on your, what? Roids?
I don't know.
Psilocybin mushrooms also grew abundantly in pastures throughout England, and cannabis was widely available in Elizabethan times, which I did not know.
I did not know that either.
If Kelly was regularly taking such visionary aids prior to his scrying sessions, he was doing so either with the help of Dee or unknown to Dee, as part of Kelly's act in projecting an aura of supernatural power. Such chemical aid may have been a cunning man trick that Kelly indulged in to win Dee's confidence. Basically, the quote-unquote cunning man was like your boony equivalent of a witch or a warlock. They were usually like farmers and shit that lived out in the sticks, but they knew all kinds of, they knew like the right toads to catch and grind them down and get all kinds of shit out. So
if you put salt on these legs, they'll dance.
Let's see. Hard pressed to deliver. Kelly may well have been trapped in a cycle of substance abuse and the progressive mental and physical deterioration that goes with it. Such a hypothesis would explain Kelly's regular quote-unquote bad trips and conclusions that the angels were really demons, as Kelly was constantly... He would go back and forth with this idea quite often. He'd be like, these are not fucking angels, I'm telling you.
Or perhaps they're just the intrusive thoughts, the altered state.
That's if he's
in
an altered state.
And hypothesis number 2?
Yeah, I think it's 2. Yeah, he went back and forth saying these things were not angels, they're demons and or unclean spirits, etc. The whole flip-flopping back and forth thing, man, fucking like, he was constantly losing his mind. And also, these quote-unquote angels really didn't fucking like him. Well, unfortunately, he was part of the process.
Well, it seems like the general consensus of Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, it's, most people don't. Let's see, while this hypothesis is reasonable and goes furthest toward resolving the origin of the often complex and mathematical nature of the visions, which do get quite complex at times, it is contradicted by the high lucidity with which Dee kept the records of the spirit actions. Though many of the sessions may have been conducted with Kelly indulging and Dee recording, or recording after the fact. Most damaging to this theory, however, is that there is no suggestion of any substances consumed, even in code. No Greek, no Latin, or other devices even hint at such a psychotropic pursuit. This is also a thoroughly modern reading of a very different time and place. Oh, that was theory 3. Theory 4, let's see, it was all cryptography. Another possibility and explanation is that the sessions could have been cryptography, espionage messages masked as occult activity. This has historical precedent, as previously discussed, the occult work of Trithemius, who did a book called Steganography. It's a super popular foundational work on cryptography as well as steganography. For those who don't know, I'm sure most people out there know what cryptography is. Steganography is when you basically hide a image or a picture
or a message.
Yeah,
inside.
Inside. Yeah.
Yeah, like those guys that did that thing on the History Channel back in 2000 on the Bibli code.
Yeah,
you can find anything if you just alter it enough.
Mm-hmm. Just switch the numbers around and play with them.
Yeah, literally,
like an obsessive compulsive weirdo, which is basically what Kabbalah is. For the most part, or at least Kabbalah to a degree, and fucking gematria and all these fucking other like forms of occultism that came out of it.
It's like you're so close to being right. It's just you did it like wrong and weird. You want to know all the stuff?
Well, I think that
just catalog it and organize it in like a decimal system where there's like
do we
shit.
I had it for a second. Methods like that, I think that's sort of
Witchcraft?
well, anything that's like playing around with numbers and letters in your head, like
Yeah.
an obsessive compulsive mind game. I think that's like a fucking. I hesitate to say borderline mental health problem, but I mean it is like a weird obsessive compulsive little game. I used to do it with like what do you call it, license plates and shit. I don't know. Or just like look at numbers and letters around you. I mean, I never thought I was receiving the secrets of the universe out of it, but
No, it's just a fun game to remember what's R in the phonetic alphabet, Romeo, and then
yeah.
all that. And like when I was doing the FFL stuff,
Fantasy football?
no, federal firearms
Oh.
licensing and transfers.
I was way off.
You had to learn that catalog, and like, man, and you got to be very clear. And I'm so glad that some of these are like really easy, but you always have like Patty or Selma on the other line, on the other end of the line.
Yeah.
X-ray, hotel.
Xerxes,
Yeah.
Lima Bean, Niner. I try to think of all the funniest words I can to do them.
The actually funny, stupid side note. I'm sorry, this is really way off topic.
Nah.
Do you know why it's Niner?
What?
Because since Germany joined NATO,
Oh, yeah.
9 would be no, so it's Niner in order to not confuse German-speaking NATO members.
I hear a Niner in there. You calling from a walkie-talkie? Dee was a keen student of both Trithemius and cryptography and was a lover of languages, codes, mathematics, puzzles, wordplay. Was also engaged in work for British intelligence, as we know, at a time of extreme geopolitical tension. Considering Dee's background and environment, it is less likely that the diaries contain no cryptography than it is that they do. Plus, his mathematical background would fucking naturally predispose him to this.
Well, even the covers of a lot of his books have some hidden stuff in there.
Oh, yeah. And then if you bring in, like, alchemical symbolism and all that shit, I mean...
Quick side note on Manus Hieroglyphica.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the cover of that, it actually has the 4 elements of nature, but it's closer related to the 4 states of matter, like as in gas, liquid, solid, plasma.
Huh.
Because
Did they have plasma? Did they count plasma back then?
Nope. But
That might be an alchemical thing.
but since it's Earth, Fire, Water, Wind, or whatever that band is,
Yeah.
you're a shining star. Do you remember? The
Yeah,
forces
plus-
of matter.
The Mona, is it monad or monus?
Monus.
Monus hieroglyphica. This was a specific symbol that Dee himself sort of formulated out of various other symbols that he used, elemental symbols, planetary and zodiacal symbols, and he sort of put them all together and created a sigil all his own that he said essentially conveyed numerous occult secrets in just one specific condensed symbol. And this was one of his works that he was really proud of, and he kind of shopped it around with some people in the upper echelons of British military and intelligence circles, and most of them were not very impressed with it. But on the reverse side of that, he did say that anyone who could sort of look at this and grasp what it is and sort of decipher the secrets of the symbol, they knew what the fuck they were doing and what they were talking about, because it was basically just a complex melange of occult ideas distilled down into one single figure. He has the symbology and the mathematical chops to fucking do this kind of thing. So cryptography, mathematics, all this background, it sort of makes him a natural fit for this. And once again, this is that overlap of occultism and espionage that works just perfect. The idea that the entirety of the spirit transmissions and angelic communications, the idea that it's less likely the diaries have no cryptography than it is that they do, yeah, I would say the same. Like, there's definitely coded symbolism. Once again, the Kabbalah, gematria, they play a part in this. So these are all sort of interlocking ideas that definitely play into this. Dee layered both cryptographic and actual occult material in his diaries, potentially stacking multiple layers, just as his idol in these pursuits, Trithemius, did. Meaning that even if the quote-unquote angelic material is at a future date demonstrated to be cryptographic in nature, this still does not rule out supernatural explanations. Of course, Dee would have wholly fabricated all of the diary entries describing supernatural events, presumably to further disguise the cryptography. And this would also not be the first instance of that. I believe another one of his occult idols, I won't say teachers because these are people who came sort of way before him and did very important works on alchemical treaties and formula, things like that. And of course, symbology is very important to occultism. You know, one symbol or glyph or drawing can convey a whole fucking host of ideas. So he wouldn't be the first, I believe, other than Trithemius with steganography. There were instances of other sort of occult espionage projects, agents, secret messages conveyed in books that are meant to come across or at least look like they're entirely works of occult, magic practice, whatever. And then you have books that are meant to look entirely like works of cryptography and, code breaking that in fact have layers of occult secrets hidden into them. Two of the more famous works that I know one is definitely related to Dee is the Book of Soiga, which is a perfect example of cryptography and occultism and symbology that's all sort of mixed together that he's been wrapping his mind around all throughout most of his adult life. He's also had tangential connections to the still unsolved Voynich manuscript, which people have yet to figure out, although this podcast host has one particular theory about the Voynich manuscript in that I think maybe it has something to do with early ideas of breeding, eugenics, let's say child rearing, things like that, and sort of stuff that played into our Conrad Dipple episode as well, as far as making homunculi, artificial beings, ideas that sort of fall within that wheelhouse. But I could be wrong. I'm just looking at the pictures. I don't know anything else. So that just leaves one final possibility that all this shit was real. And reading some of these visions that are conjured up and some of the supernatural events that occurred at Mortlake, as well as on the road later on when Dee and Kelly would have their Bing Crosby, Bob Hope travel all around the continent, get into fucking occult espionage hijinks while they were seeking out funding from other patrons and possibly also working occult espionage missions at the same time. Because as things would turn out, it wouldn't just be Queen Elizabeth nor the Catholic Church who were able to enforce orders, give orders, impart missions, directives, strategies, basically just attribute missions to them because they weren't their only bosses. These fucking angels very quickly would reveal that they have very specific plans for Dee and Kelly that affect all of creation, apparently. And these fucking psychopathic, non-human intelligences will definitely, quite quickly as well, start issuing demands of their heralds here, whatever you want to call them, their custodians on Earth, and other various insulting nicknames.
It's
and
pronounced custodian, dick.
Here you go, scientist. They've got several, sets of masters and or various agencies that they will end up ducking. They're experimenting with these occult practices and formulae, which if obviously the church finds out, that's their ass. But at the same time, they're doing things that aren't also sanctioned by Queen Elizabeth for the purposes of the kingdom. So that's another conflict of interest. And things quickly become increasingly complicated as all this fucking scheme goes on. And all John Dee wants to do, the whole reason behind all this, is he just wants to serve God and build his kingdom in the real world, on the earth, and do it with British people.
And learn the knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, he's very much... John Dee is definitely the figure which Goethe based Faust on, a man who is so consumed by the thirst for knowledge, be it forbidden or not, that it will eventually end up consuming him. And Kelly's just a fucking ne'er-do-well, and this is a job for him, but at the same time, Kelly has various ulterior motives as well. So this is a very overall dramatic soap opera. This combines a lot of genres. It's fucking soap opera. It's James Bond espionage. It's fucking period piece drama. Downton Abbey meets Aleister Crowley. It's got elements of X-Files, Aliens, which is going to come into play again later, and the ever-looming threat and presence of the apocalypse, which reaches out all the way from the 1500s when this shit was happening into today. There was another character that was most definitely modeled on John Dee. He was named Prospero the Magician in a little ditty called The Tempest, written by Bill Shakespeare. And I believe Matt has some strangeness behind what I thought for the longest time, as far as I knew, I thought Francis Bacon was the guy behind the whole Shakespeare conspiracy or Shakespeare wasn't real thing. Apparently, this has many more complicated levels to it than I even knew about.
This, according to some dirtbag on the internet, where we always find lots of stuff.
Yeah.
So during the time of
it's 50-50. He's either right or wrong.
yeah,
Take the shot.
just shoot your shot, I guess. So during the time of John Dee, there was also a man by the name of Edward de Vere, DE space VERE.
And this is the
17th Earl of Oxford.
Okay.
So it's often been rumored the play Hamlet is actually based on Edward de Vere. And that it's not only that, but it's also an autobiography of sorts. And that Edward de Vere is also the real Shakespeare. And it's all through the secret codex that John Dee helped develop in Queen Elizabeth's court as part of espionage. And so this was supposed to be the Earl of Oxford's mastery of that codex to use as in plain sight to show how effective it was and that no one would be able to prove or disprove it.
So all the Shakespeare plays are like coded messages?
It's all written under the pen name of William Shakespeare, and there's a guy, a patsy, that is supposed to be the Shakespeare person, but all the real work and stuff, and even some of the code, there is code in some of the Shakespeare plays,
Yeah.
and some of the letters and promotional stuff that was sent out as like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge to royalty and to people inside the intelligence community at the time.
So were like the stories meant to be like, I guess maybe not coded information, I guess is the right term, but like...
But there were codes in it.
Well, yeah. But the stories themselves, are they meant to be like...
Hamlet is meant to be based on this guy.
De Vere?
Yeah.
What's the John Dee connection?
So they were both in Elizabeth's court at
Yeah.
the same time. It's suspected that he was part of that he needed to learn that codex system because he was also going to be part of any espionage that was corresponding between the continent and England itself, or any other place they had to get involved in. Bear with me now because this dude sounded crazy when I heard it.
Yeah, this sounds like a wild ride.
Yeah. So there's a sacred symbol of 3 T's, right? And it's the Tau Trinities.
The Greek letter Tau.
Yeah, it's a T connected by 2 sideways T's. And so the Trinity is actually a quatrain because there's a 4th T hidden in there, right?
Okay.
So this philosophy of there being divine information hidden in the material world was the whole basis of John Dee's philosophy and trying to catalog and cabal his way through all this.
Yeah. Okay.
So as his teachings and all this stuff gets thrown into the Elizabethan court, and she's in favor of John Dee. Obviously, she likes him a lot. So anyone else that wants to get with the fucking program better be good with John Dee, right? So back in the day, around this time, it was also important to know your number and how sacred you are, because God built things in order with letters and numbers and stuff.
Like a divine mathematics sort of thing? Okay.
And so if the closer you could get to the holy numbers of like 75 and 56, you could show that you're synonymous with divinity, which is a good thing to have if you're trying to show that you're not only a pious person, but also an important person, and I have a right to rule, goddammit. And
there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah, right. Before we elect our kings.
President of beers. Is this also involved with Kabbalah? Like the whole, like, this arrangement, letters
and numbers,
spells this out, and if you...
There's a corresponding number for every letter, but it's not in English, because it's from the ancient languages. It's from Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. I want to say Hebrew. It could be Egyptian, but I'm not sure on that.
Kabbalah is all Hebrew. And then Gematria, I think, deals with Greek.
So, based on this, right, like, there's certain letters that just don't exist in Greek, right? So, like, instead of J, it's an I.
Yeah.
And there's no J in certain stuff. So, like, it's, he'd be Eon, D, and stuff like that. So, like, he could coordinate those letters to show that, obviously, I'm of divine origin. Look at my name. And all this stuff. Well,
because it equals out to
certain numbers, like 7 is a super holy number and shit like that.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, well, I'm important too, said this jerk.
De Vere.
And you guys going to De Vere's later? With just the name Edward De Vere, it didn't do anything, right? He's like, well, this is bullshit. So he adds Earl of Oxford, and when you add all the numbers and that are correspondent to the letters in that order of the name, it makes him divine. Right?
Okay.
And even the structure, like they start looking at the structure of how his name is made, because it's 6 letters, 2 letters, 4 letters, and then 462 opposite of his title, right? So 642 of the name, his title is the exact opposite. And so he would code letters that he wrote in that format, so you could see that it was something he wrote, because he would his alternate signature, allegedly, according to this guy, was TT, letter T. And so what he ended up doing.
One question: was Earl of Oxford? Is that something he gave himself, or was that a title that was already bestowed on him?
Hereditary title. He was the 17th.
Okay, so that just happened to add up as opposed to his actual name.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with literal words, Earl of Oxford, and his name, and do that structure, and then add up to divine shit. Apparently. Yeah. And so he thought, let's go, according to this conspiracy, he thought he'd have a little fun with it. And since he was a well-educated guy, he wanted to show off his mastery of this codex, that he would create an alter ego named William Shakespeare.
Okay.
But in English language, there was no W back then. It was double V.
Right.
And they overlay. Right? And so one of his other symbols or symbology he would use was the double V, because the Holy Trinity and all that, and the Latin translation of I'm the way, the light. I'm not good.
I think there's Aleister Crowley has a fucking name that's like 5 V's. It's like, I don't know the Greek or
the way
Latin that it was, but
the
it was
way
like,
it's the way, the truth, and the light, or something like that. But they all.
But it was 5 V's that he used, so it's 5
and
V.
There's actually John Dee actually has ties to the order. What is that? The Light Order or whatever. Forget what
Order of the Golden Dawn.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. There's some weird historical overlaps all throughout occult history.
So the double V was supposed to be a stamp to show his piousness. Ilium is supposed to be a reference to Minerva, who's supposed to be the goddess of theater. And then Shakespeare was supposed to be a play on the moment of when Minerva created theater by shaking her spear in the sky. And then, so the whole thing is just a parallelogram of a name composed of a moment in Greek mythology or Roman mythology and his convenient stamp of a double V. This guy shows artwork in response to like the death of a Shakespeare, which ironically died in 1616. And then it gets kind of stretchy from there, man. It like, all right, look, I know you're trying to push for this, but he had me going here because a lot of the stuff in like the sonnets of Shakespeare and stuff from King Lear and stuff, he's showing like there's these, even the structure of the stanzas, like the way they kind of make a V shape and they kind of shrink down.
Pentameter and all that.
There's moments in there where you find wherever there is a tau trinity, you're guaranteed to find a fourth. So this guy says, okay, so there's 3 T's right here. There's a 4th T somewhere hidden in the structure. And he goes through all these Shakespearean sonnets and short stuff. And
do you remember the name of the guy who putting this theory forward?
Apparently, he's really big into it and does it a lot. Like,
yeah, I want to check this out
because
this is like different from any other.
But if that's the case, then like this guy is actually like Shakespeare is a patsy. And remember, they did move the Globe Theater brick by brick off the property just to spite the landlord. So I mean, anyone that's got that much power and organizational skills and stuff like that, because I don't think there's that many players that could remove the entire Globe Theater from the property and then reassemble the motherfucker somewhere else. I mean, that's pretty intense work, man.
Yeah, that's a logistical nightmare, especially
when you're doing it under the cover of night and trying to hide it from people. I mean, like that's.
Oh, I didn't know about that aspect of it.
They were pissed.
I don't really know much about Shakespeare. See, the only thing I really know about the questioning the authenticity of whether or not Shakespeare is the actual author of all these things. I'd always heard that it was in relation to Francis Bacon.
Here we go. The name of the guy that had the video is named Alexander Waugh, W-A-U-G-H, or Waugh.
I think it's Waugh. I've heard that name before.
I mean, some of it kind of feels like it's a
reach,
a little far out there.
Yeah.
But I mean, and like I can see similarities, but similarities make not for conspiracy. I mean, just because it looks like a battery doesn't make it a battery kind of thing.
Correlation isn't causation.
There you go.
Yeah, see, this interested me when you were telling me about it earlier because I was like, I've never heard this one before because, I don't know, I could see, I have heard stories that John Dee wanted to, you mentioned earlier, he came to Elizabeth and was like, hey, we should start not only a library, but he also wanted to start like a Academy of Science, basically, because that was the new hot shit at the time.
Yeah, science and math will not only improve the arts, but it will improve all aesthetics.
Yeah,
because it's aesthetically pleasing,
and it'll fucking put us on top.
Yes.
So yeah, he wanted to start an Academy of Science, and I remember reading that when he brought that idea forward, Elizabeth was like, "Yeah, I'll think about it," and then she just never really followed through on it. But then, after John Dee died, sometime in the 1600s, you have the Royal Society, which is Francis Bacon and Isaac Newton. A lot of these guys were influenced by ideas that Dee was very much into, especially the idea of the Rosicrucian Society, which was sort of a... I heard one writer put it like basically they memed themselves into existence. The Rosicrucians were like a story, like a myth, a legend. It's basically like the Illuminati before the Illuminati came around. But a lot of the ideas that were coming up during Dee's time and then later adopted by scientists and philosophers and thinkers in the Royal Society, especially the idea of the Rosicrucians, like this is all the stuff that would basically give way to the creation of the world as we know it today, because these are the thinkers who inspired the real life Illuminati and Adam Weishaupt, and then like the French Revolution and the forefathers of the United States and things like that. There's a whole crazy pseudo-Masonic, like basically when the New World was discovered, they were like, yeah, it's the new Atlantis. We're going to build the new Atlantis. And this is going to be like an idealized society, a utopia, etc.
Where people could marry their cousins.
Yeah, these are all like the influences that come out of a lot of what Dee was doing because, these are the precursors to like science and mathematics. and he's also dabbling in alchemy and astronomy and astrology, etc.
And
These are the ideas that came out of the Enlightenment that
And those sciences
carry over.
Sciences, I say with a lot of quotes around me when I do it. Those sciences, most of them, they all overlap, right? So like, there's a little bit of everything in there, and thus facilitating this concept that it's all interwoven. Giving it a name gives it power, and so on and so forth. And then
The other name that the Royal Society went by was the Invisible College. Basically, the fundamental unifying factor for all the people involved was like we were all influenced by these same sort of utopian ideas and the potential good that we can do in the world, bringing logic and reason and science, all these things that were birthed out of the Enlightenment and the Renaissance. And they wanted to use these and wield these to create a new perfect society, and that's why they were calling the New World like the New Atlantis and shit like that.
We've got a chance to start over, like leave all this behind.
Basically, we just have to exterminate, like, I don't know, just all the people who are there already.
It's like 2 or 3.
They'll understand.
What a trade.
But no, yeah, the Royal
Lord.
Society, like, or the Rosicrucian Society, like, started off as just like this legend and this story that was all about, there's this secret society that no one knows about, and this is not real, it's a story, but the story goes that it's all these secret, like, enlightened dudes. Sound familiar? And then they basically were like, hey, we're all fucking enlightened. We came out of the Enlightenment, and we know science and shit. We should all team together. So it's basically like a think tank, more or less. And they end up government affiliated, but also just influencing fucking everything from that point on. But at the same time, they're also
Mostly change.
Yeah.
Can I get some change? Quarters mostly. Let me ask my manager.
Yeah, but they
No.
were also, they ended up operating at a time, fucking King James is fucking the guy in power. Like, you had this period here with John Dee and a couple other guys who were somewhat like-minded, and then fucking Elizabeth's gone, here comes King James, and shit gets really bad from that point on.
Ironically, the first time that it became the United Kingdom was when he was coronated. Because he united the thrones of Scotland and England.
Reoccurring theme also of there's a willful ignorance and distrust of science and these new schools of thought, because anything new or like it's like you're using a lot of $10 words at me,
Yeah.
and I don't like it. I find it disrespectful, and I don't know why you just can't
Talk to me like you know me or something.
marry God and call it a day, and everything's fine. It's what everyone else has been doing forever. And Dee was a huge proponent of that, or Kickstarter of that.
But it is human nature to,
distrust the intelligent.
well, maybe that a little bit, but everyone's
Different, I mean.
a little less inclined to change their ways after you've been doing something for a long time. But I mean, man,
Oh yeah,
Once-
you got to drag them kicking and screaming.
yeah, but once you show them like the ease and convenience of things, I mean, granted, we live in a very convenient time.
Oh yeah,
Everything is super. You would have, well, ain't that a goddamn geographical oddity? 2 weeks from everywhere was almost 100 years ago, and
is that
now
a Starbucks across the street from a Starbucks? What is this? The
Yeah.
nexus of the universe?
this is where the reality map starts over again. You got to ease people into new ways of thinking and all that stuff. If you just try to make a knee-jerk reaction out of something, people are definitely going to react the wrong way, or at least react a violent way,
And especially when it's people who are basically in the cultural death throes of mounting insignificance in the face of a changing world, such as the Catholic Church or the fucking King of England around this time. Plus, these ideas are coming out of places and from people like John Dee, who was ultimately, in his own time, disgraced as a fucking nutcase and a sorcerer, despite all the fucking vast amounts of scientific and mathematical knowledge he had.
Someday we're going to fake a moon landing on TV. Well, yeah, whatever what the fuck? Fake a moon landing? Why did they do that? And what's
Get that new kid. What's his name? Rubik's Cube director had the big baby in space. Monkey hit a Coke machine. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then also like ideas like the Rosicrucians.
That was a reference inside a reference.
Yeah,
It was nice.
a riddle wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in a
pastry.
No, yeah, and then like that whole Rosicrucian idea. I mean, that came out of like occult pamphlets and shit. And knowing where these certain ideas come from, institutions like the Catholic Church and the fucking throne of England are going to be very hesitant to accept them, especially when they're reinstating fucking witch hunter laws and, you know, burning people at the stake again and the Inquisition's back, etc. Dark times.
Well, you know, and then even with the English in particular, man, I mean, kind of feel like every 50 to 100 years they're like getting a new form of government, kind of, you know, the Magna Carta in 1215, and then it's like, okay, so we can have a parliament, but I'm still king, right? Yeah, but you got to run shit by us, too. And like, oh, well, I'll just disband it. Okay, yeah, see how that works out for you.
Yeah.
Is that a threat? No, it's a fact, motherfucker. And like, and then the closest thing to...
all I'm saying is my political powers versus your symbolic powers, there's no contest.
Yeah. I couldn't help but notice there, King, that you kept asking us for money. And no, we're not going to do that anymore. You're going to have to go you're going to have to go buy the book, sir. Like, England was a republic for like a brief period of history after King James, I think. Believe it or not, another civil war broke out. This time it wasn't over religion or who had the biggest house.
Yeah, during much of the time that the Royal Society existed and were sort of, I won't go as far to say as orchestrating things from behind the shadows, but they did exercise a lot of influence, mostly culturally. But at the same time, culture is pretty much in shitty shrapnel shambles.
Yeah.
Fucking
Well, I mean, the objective of a king or queen is to guide and defend their peoples, and if you're not even going to improve their lives, well, then what the fuck is the fucking point? You just hold on for power now, that's all.
Yep.
So
that's a weird I'm gonna have to look into that one. Wow.
Yeah, it's a little odd. Yeah, his divine numbers or whatever for
I think I saw a video or two by that guy.
Is it's his divine number and his code number or whatever.
See, that's so, I don't know, like.
But if you're looking for the video, it's the incalculable genius of John Dee. And then there's also this guy named Ghostman, and he's got a song called John Dee.
Oh yeah.
I haven't heard it yet, but
he's all right. It's very Southern trap style. So yeah. Back to angels and sort of wrapping all this together. The whole endeavor to fucking communicate with these angels is very inextricably interlinked with the building of the British Empire. This is the whole occult side of things. This is basically getting God's A-OK and thumbs up and like, yeah, fucking do it. Fucking white people are my favorite, I guess, whatever. And that was their plan. And they end up getting the language. They talk to all these angels. And here's the weird thing also about the Enochian language. The language has its own grammar, syntax. Enochian was also assessed by skeptical Australian linguist and anthropologist Donald Laycock in the 1970s. Laycock concluded that Kelly's early untranslated speeches in Enochian were probably transglossolalia, aka speaking in tongues, and that the later Enochian transmissions that were given translations reveal a phonology, a grammar, and a word order that were largely English, with an incomplete and not un-English grammar system and an arbitrary vocabulary, in part because so few words were given, so they had to like keep expounding upon it through further work with the angels and transfigurations of the library as they'd received it, with some words appearing randomly generated. However, he did find a structure of repeating root words for which he had no ready explanation. He also states that he is mystified by the numerical structure or gematria of Enochian, and that the test of any future revelations will be if they can explain the mathematical structure of the language. Undermining the cryptography theory, though, Laycock did conclude that the angelic calls are not a cipher. Laycock's final summation is that I do not think anyone can afford to be dogmatic in this area, noting that he has known many people who claim to have gotten results by using the angelic system, because it is also a operative, occult, magical system to call down quote-unquote angels in order to affect various happenings within the physical world.
Goings on.
Yeah. But the angels' limitations are those of Kelly. Their occasional sublimities, those of Dee. So they essentially end up like transcribing an entire alphabet, a large portion of a vocabulary, and they receive all these specific communications from specific angels who are prophesying and telling them all this shit that's going to happen and giving them missions that they need to complete in order to further along in this overall grand arching scheme. And it basically sends them on the road later on. This is when they get on to the other intrigues with various smaller potentates and powers and principalities, which I use those words very specifically because allegedly every nation supposedly has there's a hierarchy of angels, and
Well,
not
that's
a lot
convenient.
of people, not a lot of people know this, but most angels are fucking terrifying, Lovecraftian, cosmic entities and fucking eldritch abominations. The seraphim, they're basically just like a big fucking like spinning wheel of wings. Not even a wheel, they're just a bunch of wings that branch off in different directions with a fucking eye in the center. And then like the Ophanim, I think they're called. Those are the ones that are like the rings that spin around with like 100 eyes on the side, and they're on fire, and they just fucking constantly revolve in and out of each other. Things like that.
Sounds like that Misfits song. Danzig song, 20 Eyes.
Maybe.
In my head.
That could be a reference. So yeah, they're fucking terrifying. It's usually why when people encounter angels, when the angels come down in the Bible, the first thing they usually say to a human being is "Be not afraid," because they don't say the second part, because I know I look fucked up and scary. But every nation state allegedly there's another classification of angels called powers and principalities, which in fact are somewhat tangentially related to the Gnostic archons we talked about before in Simon Magus episode. Yeah. Every nation has its like presiding zeitgeist for that nation that's like an overseeing guardian angel of the country. And they thought that also, while hitting the road all throughout the continent, Dee and Kelly, the main story was that they were trying to get funding to do further experiments and continue their studies.
And convince Rudolph II of the HRE that if he just would be a better Christian, he'd be the most powerful.
Yeah, that was a reoccurring theme with a lot of people, especially a scumbag by the name of Oblak Lasky, who the angels eventually were like, that guy, he sucks, but if we can maneuver it just right to put him on the throne of Poland, we got our shit locked up. Like, the apocalypse is going to happen. No problem. Oh, yeah, that's their final endgame, by the way.
Oh, nice.
The apocalypse. But remember, apocalypse is a Greek word that means revelation. However, these fucking angels talk a lot about fire and brimstone and fucking psychedelic, bloody battlefields and all kinds of shit, so it's not quite all the way clear what fucking end they're working towards. But yeah, these angels are fucking like setting off events and manipulating people and trying to essentially control all this espionage and intrigue to set up not only the British Empire, but the rest of the continent and sort of dictate world events and create powers and principalities of their own. And while Dee and Kelly are like going around looking for funding, it's been speculated that they're also trying to contact these smaller countries on the continent, the other places besides England. They're trying to like make occult contact with the
Count of Monte Cristo,
the guardian angel of these other nations. It's a sandwich. The angels are fucking psychopathic, dude, and they're constantly telling them, you need to do this, you need to do that. You know, you gotta fast, you can't eat, don't sleep for several days, things like that. You have to purify yourself. That's constantly what the fucking story is. So yeah, these angels, if that's what they are, they're exercising plans. They're deceptive. They're psychopathic. They're manipulative at best. What is their agenda? Well, let me tell you what their agenda is. It's nothing less than the fulfillment of the biblical fucking apocalypse, by which I mean the end of the world. By which I mean the second coming of Junior. Which Junior? That's the thing they don't say. It could be either one. But what's really important, what the angels stress to Dee and Kelly, is that in order for the apocalypse and the second coming, the final days, to be kicked into activation, well, it requires human stewardship. Because apparently, according to the angels, God gave man free will, and it's going to take the exercising of that agency to a particular end in order to kickstart the apocalypse. Because of that, they've picked Dee and Kelly to sort of be these sort of earthly agents that are going to act as pawns, more or less, in a global chess game that will resonate through history in order to kickstart the global apocalypse and the return, or coming, I should say, of Junior. But which Junior? The whole idea of Kelly being a charlatan of sorts, a lot of people really stick to that idea because eventually they would receive a message from the angels. No, not a message, a fucking demand from the angels that John Dee and his wife and Edward Kelly and the woman he married that he doesn't like are to swap. They got to swing. And this message from on high, which the angels also said that the big man upstairs was wanting them to do, is like, hey, this comes from top floor, buddy. Got to do it. John Dee was very distraught. He was like, well, this is fucked up. This makes me call everything into question. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. But at the same time, I'm so devoted to God, and I want to, do this whole British Empire thing with his blessing. Also, I think Edward Kelly is a dickhead. And they've had their trouble this whole time, but this really fucking kind of kicks things into hyperdrive as far as their relationship, their business relationship goes. And eventually, they acquiesce, well, to a degree. Edward Kelly definitely sleeps with John Dee's wife as much as she fucking hated Edward Kelly and hated the whole idea.
Oh, Ed.
John Dee, on the other hand, when he absconded with Edward Kelly's wife, couldn't seal the deal. Didn't want to. Didn't have it in him. So later on, when they're being asked by the angels, like, did you do this? Like, are you doing all the things we're telling you? Are you studying the alphabet? Are you fucking doing the tables? Are you doing the equations and the formulae? Are you sleeping with each other's wives?
Are you doing the exercises?
Yeah. Edward Kelly's like, yep, I did it. Get off my back, angels. And John Dee's like, nope, didn't do it. It's like, well, shouldn't have done that. So from that point on, the angels sort of get a lot pushier, a lot more severe in the imagery of the visions that they're broadcasting to Kelly and Dee. They keep on reiterating the fact that the apocalypse needs humans to oversee the whole thing. They have to make the decision, directly or indirectly, knowingly or unknowingly, to kickstart the biblical apocalypse. And for those who don't know, overall, the prophesied return of Jesus, of the Messiah, there are certain things that have to take place in the world before he can come back. And one of those things is I'm gonna try and extricate this from certain global events taking place right now as best I can. This is just what the Bible says, and I'm rolling with it. Basically, all of Israel has to be converted to Christianity, and the rest of the world as well. But there will be, war and conflagrations of flame and fucking just not a good time, basically. But that's got to happen. That's one of the things. And then they have to go, rebuild Solomon Temple in the Holy Land or something like that. I don't know the exact list and what all needs to take place.
They got to build a Dave and Buster's.
King David and Buster's.
There you go.
Yeah. But these are the things that, are prerequisite. One thing has to happen before another thing can happen. This is what's known in theology as dispensationalism. So, yeah, Revelation demands that the returning of the Jews to Palestine, followed by eventual conversion to Christianity, are both prerequisites for the return of Christ and the biblical apocalypse. And apparently, there's some evangelicals today who think British failure to work towards making a Jewish state and America's overall urge to do so from a historical standpoint is why global supremacy shifted away from the British Empire to America as a global superpower. Yeah, there'll be a lot of that. Conversion of all the pagans and Muslims as well is also a prerequisite. All of this also happens to be central to the plans of Dee's angels as well. Essentially, like I said, the apocalypse requires human stewardship. This is why a large number of evangelicals are so interested in politics and intelligence and wars like World War I and World War II, who were just merely foreshadowing the coming Antichrist and the biblical apocalypse. Basically, they have a raging boner for holy war and slaughter of the non-believers. And godless communism and freaky, makes me uncomfortable 60s counterculture were further signs of this, essentially. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because, see, the whole meeting up of Edward Kelly and John Dee, this whole thing is sort of written in the stars because they never would have got the Enochian angel language. They never would have talked to these angels and received these plans if the two hadn't hooked up. And there's sort of this eternal occurrence sort of thing going on with Enochian because despite the fact that they were given this language, despite the fact that they were given these instructions, despite the fact that they were given these magical formulae by angels to essentially return the pre-Adamic language of man before the Tower of Babel fell and get the power of creation through God's language. Like when, he said, in the beginning was the Word and everything was made, basically. And on the seventh day, he said, go Cowboys. He probably didn't.
Probably.
It's America's team.
Yeah.
The angel said that you can use this magic that we're giving you, but you have to do all this other stuff first. You can't use it until we say, go ahead. We have to give you the okay. And they never got to do that because essentially Edward Kelly would end up basically just leaving John Dee's fucking employ as soon as he got access to all his books on alchemy.
Drunk and passed out on the couch.
He was living with them and working 24/7, basically. His fucking family hated him. So yeah, Edward Kelly was basically more or less just sticking around the whole time to get a paycheck, have free room and board, more or less, and get access to John Dee's books on alchemy so that he could figure out how to make gold on his own. Because as we've seen at this time, many like royals and nobles all over Europe are hiring alchemists to fill their pockets and make their nations rich, which they've yet to find out. Most of this is con man bullshit. However, Edward Kelly was able to more or less convince Rudolph, the Holy Roman Emperor, that he was able to make gold out of lead. And this ended up basically having Rudolph poach Edward Kelly from John Dee. And John Dee was like, well, fuck, I need him. He's my scryer. I can't do anything else. So this left John Dee up shit creek without a paddle. He returned to England, and by this time...
I thought he had a turd for a paddle.
Let's meet halfway and say chicken leg. Drumstick?
Thigh.
Yeah. Okay. Around this time, he's like, well, fuck that plan. He goes back to England. Things have gotten so bad in England with the whole Protestant Catholic thing and more scrutiny being placed on Elizabeth because of her, let's say, libertarian lax outlook on such things as occultism, that it's become a real problem. And she basically has to totally fucking distance and disassociate herself from John Dee. So long story short, John Dee eventually fucking dies in obscurity, which is pretty fucking horrible because he did a lot. He changed the world.
Yep. And in poverty.
Yeah. And he changed the world to such a degree, arguably, he's reached into the future through his experimentation and contact with these quote-unquote angels. And if you look at the history of Western esotericism, like this is, John Dee and Edward Kelly are talking to these angels in the 1500s, right? Enochian kind of takes a back seat in more esoteric practices for quite a while until it's sort of revived, for lack of a better term, by the Golden Dawn in the late 1800s. They start incorporating it into their magical practice, and it's sort of big, not like big time, but it does revitalize the interest and study into it. And along comes a big fat dickhead named Aleister Crowley. So Aleister Crowley, fucking, he's constantly got to prove that he's like the smartest guy in the room. He's edgelord number one. He's more grimdark and goth than you. Metal up your ass.
He's got to prove that he's the baldest guy in the room.
Yeah. So he gets together with a poor guy named Victor Newberg, who is essentially his fuck puppet slash magical partner slash source of constant abuse. Like, he abuses the shit out of Newberg. Like, psychologically traumatizes him, fucks him up real bad. They had a weird, just really abusive relationship, but they were also magical partners. They do this ritual called the Amalantra working. I could be wrong on that. Most of it's recounted in a work called The Vision and the Voice, where Victor Newberg and Aleister Crowley go out to the desert. And as we said, Dee and Kelly, they never got to really practice the use of any of these magical formula that were given to them by angels. And there were a lot of warnings handed down with these formula. Like, oh, by the way, here's basically 30 formula that will open up other dimensions or portals to the heavenly realms. You can open them all except this one. Don't open this one. So like, okay, that's weird, whatever. But they never get to use any of it because their working relationship is dissolved. So years later, Victor Newberg and Crowley are out in the desert, and they're like, hey, let's open all of them. And they eventually get to the last one, the one that is not supposed to be opened. And it lets this demon named Karanzan through that, like, possesses Crowley. He almost kills Victor Newberg during this ritual out in the desert. Luckily, Victor Newberg fucking held him off with a dagger and was, like, able to meditate really hard to scare the demon away. I don't know.
Thank God for that.
Yeah, the details are very strange and weird.
The records from that era are sketchy at best.
Yes. Plus, it's Crowley, who's a fucking phenomenal bullshit artist, so who knows? I mean, really, who knows? But anyways, the opening of this gate that wasn't meant to be open has sort of let this demon out into the world. Basically, more or less like a occult thought virus, I guess you could say, as well as the fact that they've talked to all these angels. They opened all these gateways, like 49 of them total. And now that they've done it, they've got the formula to do it. Like, they know how it's done. But Victor Newberg is forever fucking scarred. Him and Crowley fucking don't talk to each other anymore. He's terrified of him. And it kind of ends there. But Crowley, like, makes a magical record of everything they did with these experiments. And eventually kind of puts it on the shelf. And then years later, a couple decades later, another guy comes along named Jack Parsons. And he gets into these fucking rituals. And he starts opening portals. And him and another guy by the name of L. Ron Hubbard, perhaps you heard of him, they perform a ritual called the Babylon Working, which is sort of a alteration of one of these rituals that many believe this occurred. They did this ritual out in the desert, like in Nevada, or no, yeah, deep out in the western desert of the United States in the year 1947, right before flying saucers start showing up. So there's a lot of people who believe that there's a very serious connection between these rituals and the opening of these gates. due to the rituals they perform. Because as I said earlier, we don't really know that these are quote-unquote angels. We just know that they're non-human intelligences.
And they're saying to do stuff like swing and stuff.
They got weird agendas.
Yeah.
They got their own thing going on.
Clearly perverted agendas.
Yeah. So they perform this ritual. They conjure up something. They open a portal and something comes through. Next thing you know, flying saucers are all over the fucking place from that point on in the United States. Not only that, but you've also got alien abductions, which are, fucked up, scary aspect of this whole thing. So it used to just be, hey, there goes a flying saucer. Next thing you know, people are having like sleep paralysis demons do whatever the fuck to them in scientific experiments. And that's just amongst other things. There's a whole ritual to bring in a moon child and make a living homunculus and all this and all that. But basically, Jack Parsons is the agent through which these Enochian rituals and calls and portal openings are kept alive once again. From there, he sort of gets influence as well. Like, it's hard to tell where the line between some of this blurs, but there's speculation that it's not entirely an accident that Jack Parsons would go on to become the very important figure in the space race that he became. So this is sort of a continuation of this potential angel/alien agenda to get us into the outer stratosphere, into the stars, amongst the stars. And there are students of Crowley's also, Crowley himself included in this. They think that making contact with these non-human entities and intelligences is going to be the number one evolutionary catalyst for humanity to reach the stars, like to live amongst the stars, maybe even interbreeding with these fucking things. So you also have the aspect of alien abductions, weird hybrid experiments. There's always a fucked up sexual nature to these abductions, basically. And not only that, Scientology is born. So that's just a weird plus on the side. And not only that,
That comes with the lunch.
yeah.
You know?
And this is all, this is all playing, they've also been responsible for the kickstarting of global events with the British Empire that brings us into the 20th century, where post-World War II, we hit into the Cold War, the space race, the atomic age. These are all very scary things that signal a potential apocalypse right around the corner. Plus, godless communism, freaky hippies, like I said.
Yeah.
So
2 minutes to midnight.
yeah, that clock's a ticking.
Yeah.
From there, there's rumors. Some of it's unsubstantiated, but there is good documentation that does sort of back some of this up. There's a movement inside the U.S. government that
Deep in the bowels of the U.S. government.
in the annals of history. Yeah, and we've talked about them a little bit before, I think. We have the stories of UFO and UAP crash retrievals and what were they calling them? Non-human biologics?
Yeah.
Wasn't that the phrase they were using?
And then they gave a day for testimony, and then they put it into a private hearing where
They put it on a boat, like a private boat, a skiff.
Yeah.
They went skeet shooting.
Yeah.
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 And then everyone fucking stopped giving a shit about the story.
Yeah, weird.
Yeah.
How weird that's
I think it's weird that they fucking wheeled it out when they did. I don't know, but whatever.
And then nothing came of it at all.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned. Like, I watched it as it was unfolding
Yeah, me
that
too.
day. I'm like,
And
you guys
then-
got to be shitting me, man.
Then we have Mexican Congress like, hey, look, we got these corpses, supposedly. But once again,
Well, cultural exports, Mike.
Yeah.
If they see us do it, obviously they got to have a better version.
you've got all this alien shit going on in the background, especially during the middle of the atomic age, 50s, 60s. You've got Blue Book, investigations into this thing, crash retrievals, etc. You've got the abductions going on. You have contactees taking place or supposedly establishing telepathic communication with non-corporeal, non-human intelligences, etc. That's taking place in the background or the foreground sometimes of 2 minutes to midnight. Once again, the apocalypse looms. It's not long after that, after the reaction to, first of all, godless communism and freaky dirty hippies. Eventually here comes President Carter. Say what you will about the man, but he farms a mean peanut. But during his presidency, you see the rise of evangelical Christianity in this country, and those people eventually ingratiate themselves into the Reagan administration, and Reagan is constantly talking about aliens in the apocalypse. And on top of that, or running parallel to that, you have these investigations into aliens, and there are factions within the government who are either directly or indirectly involved with the studies and research into whatever this UFO phenomenon may be. This actually played out recently with Lou Elizondo and that whole ATIP program. He sort of alluded to this, and there's a book by a researcher named Nick Redfern called Final Events that also goes into this. But supposedly, there is a contingent within the U.S. government and military and intelligence agencies who were largely responsible for studying much of the UFO phenomena and abductions, etc., who definitely make a strong connection to all of this stuff really ramping up after Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard were fucking around with angel magic all the way back from John Dee and used by Crowley to open some portal. They're strongly of the opinion that these are not aliens. These are, in fact, demons.
Demons.
So it's a group called the Collins Elite, but they're the reason that most of the modern, ATIP was shut down, supposedly. There are people in the government who are like, we don't want to investigate this shit. It's poking the bear. Nothing good will come of this. It's dark shit. We can't touch it. Don't do it. This plays out even weirder if you consider the idea of ultra-terrestrials or fucking interdimensional entities and things like that. Like, why these things can walk through walls and abduct people out of their rooms in the middle of the night. Why it's equated with sleep paralysis, but at the same time, people have fucking chips in them or whatever, or vast alleged hybridization programs taking place, an insidious, sinister invasion taking place under our noses, incubi, succubi, all these mythological and current folkloric and conspiratorial sort of overlaps.
Oh yeah, it just changes over time. I mean,
yeah. That's the thing about the ultra-terrestrial idea, is because whatever these things are, think of back in the day when people were abducted by fairies and shit and spirited away to the other world. That's because fairies lived out in the wild, just several steps beyond the fringes of what we know and where we live. Update that to today, they're in outer space because that's just outside the fringes, several steps beyond what we know. In 20, 30, 50, even 100 years from now, whatever it is, they're still going to be
on the edge of that.
Yeah, we might advance in quantum physics, etc., and that's when the whole interdimensional idea is going to become a little better understood, but at the same time, ultra-terrestrials still continue to be one step outside the fringes of what we know and understand.
It's a non-understood commodity.
Yeah, it's an X factor. It's random, it's chaotic, it's
constant.
The unknown.
Which is weird.
A variable that will always remain a variable. And I also need to point out the delicious irony that that during the Reagan administration, when guys like Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, who's another one of those dickheads, Billy Graham, all these guys who are super into,
apocalypse preaching?
Yeah, all that shit. Basically, these guys are ingratiating themselves into the Reagan administration. He's having private dinners with these people. He's even, inviting them to consult on, religious matters and shit like that. And basically, Ronald Reagan, in conjunction with the USSR, are holding the world hostage 2 minutes to midnight with atomic ICBMs, which are being wielded by these evangelical Christians, yet at the same time, those same ICBMs are propelled by rocket fuel made by a Satanist who basically was one of the unofficial founding fathers of NASA. And, you know, our silly narrative of escaping the planet and evolving into fucking going out into space among the stars or whatever.
Well, why do that when we can just make it all Christmas lighty?
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. No, yeah, it's just gonna be it's just gonna be dickheads like Elon Musk and George Soros. You know, they're gonna go get their own private Mormon planet in outer space. But nobody wants to fix the problems here. Everyone is fucking written off the planet Earth, basically. Either that, or maybe they know something we don't, and this whole fucking alien insidious invasion hybridization program.
Speculation.
That's what I'm saying. I'm painting a scary narrative here. I'm wanting to traumatize our audience.
Have you guys looked at Elon Musk? That will traumatize anyone.
I know he named one of his kids X795 or some shit.
Well, that's what you do to cattle so you don't have to get attached to them.
Yeah. He's an alpha. What are you going to do, you know? Alpha's got an alpha. I'll throw this into just for extra kooky conspiracy theory related speculation. You've seen the Dragnet movie, right? With Dan Aykroyd and Tom Hanks?
Yeah, I recently watched that about less than a month ago.
That movie knows more than you know. Or it lets on more than... I think that movie is, like, the whole plot of it is exactly kind of what I've been saying about clown ops and shit about, like, you know, satanic panic and whatnot.
So Dan Aykroyd is a national treasure.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. Dude, he fucking saved us from Gozer the Gozerian. Ghostbusters is one of the most, like, perfectly blended, like, science fiction / Lovecraftian sort of story. And it has this weird Crowley and sex magic thing going on in the background, too, with the whole gatekeeper keymaster thing. Interdimensional ghosts from other realms, etc., and occultism. Anywho, in the Dragnet movie, you have pagan, right? People against good and normalcy.
Yeah.
But it's really headed up by the church, that weird mega church. You can't spell evangelical without CIA. Satanism is just the code red Mountain Dew to Christianity's regular Mountain Dew. It's all Mountain Dew. Some have even speculated that Aleister Crowley's little, you know, quote unquote religion that he came up with, Thelema, could be seen as sort of apocalyptic Christianity's Black Ops team, because he took on the whole guise of the Beast 666 and wanted to conjure up the Scarlet Lady, the Whore of Babylon, or whatever. He's basically playing a part to kick in with this whole idea of dispensationalism. Like, this guy has to show up and play his part before this next thing can happen. So Junior, either one, can show up next.
The Omen.
Damon, or Jeebus. So, yeah.
Oh, look here, there's a typo.
Come to the BBBQ? What's that extra B for? BYOB.
BYOBBQ? Bring your own barbecue?
That's a typo. I have this vast overarching narrative that, you know, I don't necessarily believe this whole story, but a lot of it does fit together. And from what we know of, you know, ancient Gnosticism and things like that, there can be these sort of unspoken away team Black Ops side of religion. If they can do it with governments and, you know, intelligence agencies, why wouldn't a religion? Plus, we know that the apocalyptic evangelicals have deep ties to the government and intelligence agencies. That's why these motherfuckers scare me so much. And it doesn't even have to be all the alien shit. It doesn't have to be non-human intelligences or whatever.
Oh, well, you can have a religious institution hire a PMC. That's fine. That's actually totally legal in the U.S.
Or start one.
Yeah.
Or just combine the two.
And then
the guy who started Blackwater is a fucking who boy.
Well, I mean the
Eric
Knights
Prince, I think
the Knights Templar is the same thing, and it showed that they can do what a state can do. In fact, they're actually better at banking than most states.
Yeah, I was going to say, you throw financial institutions into that mix, and holy shit, man.
It's the J.P. Olstein Squad automatic weapon.
Rockefeller.
Yeah.
Rockefeller.
Oysters.
What's also weird is that guys like, it turns out that the same extremely fundamentalist evangelical Christian sect known as the Plymouth Brethren, which Crowley grew up in, and his mom was like, "You're the great beast, 666," growing up. So, like, he grew up to, like, sort of own it. And he was like, yeah, fuck it. That same religious group is the exact same religious group that has influenced, same books written by the same preacher who started it, has influenced guys like Billy Graham and fucking Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson. So there's, like, all these weird, like, cyclical connections to it, too. I know it sounds like the paranoid rantings of a madman, but oh yeah, I don't know. All I see, really, is confirmation of what I once suspected. And everyone should go watch the Dragnet film from the 1980s. And the Satanic Panic was a marketing scheme to send people into the arms of the church. And baby-eating adrenochrome Illuminati elites conspiracy narratives are being used as a goddamn clown op upon a more credulous, naive, ignorant cross-section of the population, purely for the purposes of putting completely shitty, narcissistic, dickhead psychopaths into positions of power. Boom! That's my whole thesis.
Again.
Closing out, I did have another brain fart looking at all this stuff. Has nothing to do with my vast rant conspiracy thing I just said. I did mention outer space gangster alchemy, and we were talking about gunpowder, right?
Right.
So the Philosopher's Stone, it turns lead into gold. I'm thinking gunpowder is the Philosopher's Stone because it turns lead, bang, 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 into gold. I have your money. See? It's thinking outside the box.
That is.
Yeah.
That's just highway robbery.
Yeah. Unhinged.
Wheels off.
Yeah.
But that's all right. I think people like it when we do that stuff. 'Cause,
Yeah.
You know?
Get a little off the deep end occasionally.
Yeah. You got to do that.
I was looking at several true crime instances to close this episode out with. There's one that's really stuck with me for quite a long time now. I'm not going to go into it. I'm just going to tell everyone it's called the Fidel Lopez case. You can go look into it if you want, but I advise, like...
Discretion is advised.
Yeah, let me just say, like, I was born without a vagina. It's hard, you know, but I'd made it this far. But when I saw the videos for what happened in this Fidel Lopez case, I couldn't help but be racked with an overall spectral sympathy pain for my non-existent vagina because of what happened in this case. It's just that the thing has affected me so much. And I saw this story like almost a year ago, but it's just stuck with me and sort of festered in my mind that it's become kind of like the VHS tape from the film The Ring. I have to pass it on to all of you now, just to get rid of it, get it out of my head. So check at your own discretion. However, I got a much more, I hesitate to say, lighthearted crime story, but there is a dead man in it, and there is a mystery at the center of it. So, Japan, Fukushima. No, nothing with that. This takes place in Fukushima, Japan in 1989. A woman.
She's lady.
A teacher.
Okay.
She works at school.
All right.
They have these little, sort of like cabins that everyone lives in, sort of like dormitories that the teachers like live on campus in. But everyone shares like a outhouse restroom.
Yeah,
It's
commons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She goes out to the restroom, and they've kind of changed this a lot in the last few years, but Japan has usually had those squatty potties, you know, you have to sort of get down, you have to hunch or whatever.
The more correct pooping position.
Yes. The more effective, at least, so I've heard. Anywho, So this woman, she goes out from her dormitory to the commons restroom area, goes in the women's restroom to the squatty potty to do her business, and she looks down in the hole. You know, she's not doing it on purpose, but she's walking up to the thing, and she kind of just looks in there, just glances, you know, inadvertently, and she sees a shoe down in there.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So she's like, what the fuck? What is going on? What is that?
When did I eat a shoe?
Well, she hasn't gone yet.
Oh. Well, that would be even more complicated.
Yeah, that would be an extra complex layer of this mystery. So, yeah, she sees the shoes. She's like, what the fuck? So, like, she gets, like, you know, she kind of hovers over the hole. And, you know, because these are squatty potties, they basically hook up to a septic tank underneath. And she's looking at this shoe, and she looks a little closer. She's not quite sure, but she could swear she sees a face looking right up at her. Yeah. Pretty freaky, right?
A little bit.
Yeah. It would score me
When did I
forever.
shit a face?
What's that accent? Mouthful shit? Anyways.
She looks down and she sees...
She sees a face down there with the shoe on it. Like it's like the shoe is like doing a just piss poor job of trying to hide the face, basically.
Yeah, no pun intended.
Yeah, it really wasn't.
Huh.
So obviously she freaks the fuck out. She goes to the building administrator and reports it. She's like, I think there's like a pervert like down in the septic tank. Like his face is like pointing up to the, you know, the hole where the business goes through. And I don't like it. No, sir. Don't like it. So they send someone out, building maintenance. They call the cops as well. And they go to inspect there's an outside of the, you know, the commons restroom area. There's like a grate that someone can open up and get into.
Yeah, to service the septic
the
tank
septic
if
tank
need
area.
be.
They can't really tell because it's such a small, cramped area, but there is, in fact, a guy down there. And they're like, hey, what the fuck are you doing?
What are you doing down there?
What is wrong with you? No response. So, you know, I imagine they yell at him some more, probably poke him with a stick a few times.
Probably. Just to get the scent.
Yeah, guy's dead. Now, if you're kind of not... I didn't used to be this way, but I don't know, maybe it's because I've grown up and become a large person, but I can get claustrophobic pretty easily, especially in small spaces. Every diagram I've seen of how the body is situated in this septic tank, it's, first of all, it's insanely nightmarishly cramped. And somehow this guy also, like, he doesn't have his clothes on. He's got all his clothes off, and he's, like, holding them to his chest. And this fucking septic tank, it's in a U shape. Like a squared U shape. You know, all 90-degree angles, basically. From where his face is, that's one side of the U, and then outside is the other opening to the U into the septic tank. And his body is lodged under the U, you know, the U-bend, with his legs held up to his knees. All his clothes are off, and he's holding them to his chest. And the way that he has been positioned into this septic tank, according to all the graphs I've seen,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm seeing the graph now, and
it's nightmarish. First of all. Second of all, I don't think anyone could have crawled into that position themselves, because the way that his knees are pulled up to his chest and positioned, it looks like it would be fucking next to impossible to get under that U-bend, like crawling that way with your, you know, he's taller than if he stood up, he's taller than the U-bend.
So it's I know it's all metric, so everyone that's listening to John Dee in Europe, you guys will be just fine with this. But we're American, and we only use metric on tools.
Just like Ben Franklin invented to screw other countries.
Yeah, it's from foot to head, 125 centimeters, 60 centimeters where the U is, and then the entry port for pervert to get in would be, or alleged pervert to get in,
alleged,
would be 36 centimeters. and then the opening on the squatty potty side would be about 20 centimeters. So this dude, they say that from his back to his knees, he had cramped down to 60 centimeters. And that's just, man, I mean, he would have had to go, dude, he had to go head first
Yeah.
in there and then pull
like,
himself through. And
on his back or something. And we will include this graphic. I'm sure I'll be able to find it. I'll include it in the show notes for anyone who's not able to, visualize. Stop watching so much pornography, first of all, because that's what causes that problem. Unless you want to. I don't know, whatever. Anyways, so, yeah. Now, that's the immediate thought that you had, Matt, is this guy's a pervert. He climbed down there to, not only look up, but also get, I don't know, plopped on, etc. This is a very specific fetish. And he went through quite a bit of work to get himself into this fucking U-bend in this septic tank. However, upon further inspection of the way that he is positioned, I think to the investigators, as it became to me, the more I looked at it, that it's probably impossible for this man to have gotten into the position in which he is lodged all by himself, crawling into this septic tank. And what's more, once they dig around the septic tank, they pull the whole thing out, they detach it from the building, and they've got the pipe pulled off the commons restroom area. They're able to pull this guy out. They have to break a few bones, I believe, but they get him out. And he's dead, obviously, as we stated. And from that point on, they're able to identify him. This poor man's name is Naoyuki Isagano. And as far as he's another teacher, at this little university. And as far as everyone knows, he's well liked by everyone. He has no problems with anyone, staff, students, nobody. He's very well respected. He's an upstanding citizen. So the immediate narrative, which most people are obviously jumping to, is that this was some sort of accidental death that took place while he was trying to, do whatever, pursue his special interest, I suppose. But that might not be the case. In fact, that's what a lot of people are saying. He's just not that kind of guy. He's, this is a well-respected man across the board. He's never had any problems with the law. He gets along fine with the woman who discovered him, gets along fine with all the other women he works with. He's got honors, very well liked by everyone, essentially. But the police continue to stick with the narrative that this man was, he met an accidental death in pursuit of perverse misadventure, I guess they'll call it. Something like that.
Misadventure is probably the...
Yeah. And unfortunately, there are people who... Well, not unfortunately. There are people who know that Naoyuki, he would never do that. Never, ever. And namely, the chief proponent of the Naoyuki would never, ever do such a thing narrative is his father. Senior citizen. A man who's never stopped fighting to clear his son's name. Even though, as far as I've been able to tell from the multiple videos I've watched on this case, not a lot of people seem to be budging from the death by misadventure narrative. Even though his father has gone on multiple TV shows with multiple bits of evidence, photographic evidence, character references. He's got just a giant binder of I say nay to the death by a perverse misadventure narrative that he's taking on different TV shows, and he's constantly trying to more or less preserve the good name of his son. And that brings into question also that if this were not a death by perverse misadventure, which law enforcement really wants it to be for some reason. Probably because otherwise, this is a murder. Which means they're going to have to do some investigation, get off their ass, do a little work. But that leaves open the question of, A, if this man is so well liked, if he's respected, if he's a pillar of the community, who would do this to him? And second of all, not only is the question, who would do this to him? The follow-up question is, who would do something like this to him? Usually, in cases like this, when you see things like the decedent was stabbed 30 times, when you see things like that, it generally denotes a crime of passion, intense feelings that the perpetrator had towards the victim. When you see things like this, when you see things like feces involved, degradation, that too is very personal. This is someone who quite possibly completely fucking hate this man's guts. Or at the very least, perceive some slight perhaps. But this is a kind of desecration of a corpse. It's not only murder, it's, the ultimate humiliation to leave them like this and be found. Because I'm sure that if this is a staged scene, the perpetrator is very likely of the same mindset that, that's going to be the first thing that investigators jump to. This was a death by perverse misadventure. So, I don't know. It brings into question that who could have done this? Why this way? What could this upstanding pillar of the community done that was so bad to deserve this? And as bad a death as that is, and as even, secondhand traumatizing as it is because of the claustrophobic nature of it, the person I really, really feel bad for in this whole situation is his poor senior citizen father having to constantly relive
and
this
defend him
and defend his son's name on multiple media outlets.
One bit of added information is that that is nearby the nuclear facility, so there's a lot of wild speculation there. But they do
it was also in '89. Remember that?
Yeah. So back in it happened when it was cold out there, and they say he died from hypothermia or exposure.
Yeah.
And when they found him, he had been deceased for at least 2 days. But when they removed it, that being his remains, they had to remove the whole pipe with an excavator and then cut the pipe open and then get him out.
Oh, they cut the pipe open. Okay. I thought they had to break some of his bones to.
And they when they got him out and examined him, he's been washed several times because of the fecal matter, and so there's no fingerprints or anything. Yeah. And
that's well, there's multiple reasons for that. It's the first thing they're going to have to do no matter what. They're going to have to wash his body off. And that also complicates the whole left behind evidence matter of things.
The
potentiality
only
for it.
External evidence of any kind of trauma was like some scrapes on his knees and elbows from getting into the pipe.
He didn't have anything like a bonk upside the head or anything.
Not that they were saying on here on this INF article.
Okay,
but
I feel like like I said, I've seen a couple different videos on this case, and I feel like one said that they did find some kind of indications of some initial assault, but that could be misinformation after multiple sources. This is nightmarish for multiple reasons.
Not a way you want to end up, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. There's been a sort of reoccurring TikTok and what's the other one? Tickety Boo. There's videos of, people who are specifically into this kind of thing.
Twizzler Graham.
They will, yeah, there you go. ghost fart. They will specifically jump down into these septic tanks and like duck their heads underwater. But this is like of their own volition. Yeah. Well, there's that. There's also some what are likely staged videos as well of things like that because it's such a fucking horror show.
Remember when we just used to set off firecrackers for fun?
Mm-hmm.
This is gross, Mike.
Yeah.
I hope they find the bastard that did it.
Well, 89. I mean,
We're
these
going
videos are still out, so no telling. I know that they had suspects, but I mean, obviously, I've seen these videos only in the last year. Like, I think I've seen 3 separate people cover this. And yeah, there are suspects, but no one really ever goes into anything specific. No real concrete details. Yeah, man. I don't know. It's the degradation and it's just the after effect. It's the method of, if this is in fact murder, I mean, people have secret lives. Anything's possible. But at the same time, it's just the dimensions of the pipe and the height and build of the man and just, I don't know.
I mean, it's proof that he could fit, so.
Yeah.
But on that horrible, god-awful, disgusting note, don't do that. And 2, thanks for sticking around with us.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't crawl down into septic tanks.
Please.
If you can take one message away from this show and the roughly coming up on 50 episodes
well, we got a minute, but yeah.
Really?
We're close.
Okay. 45.
Ish.
40.
Ish.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because we only did 6. Whatever. Okay. Out of all the shows we've done, if you can take one message away from all that we've said and all that we've shared with you, don't crawl into the septic tank. It's not worth it.
Nope.
There are other ways to do whatever it is you would do that for. Also, any potential murderers, serial killers, etc. out there, people looking to dispose of a body that might be listening, don't do that. Just, I don't know.
Stop breaking the law.
Well, yeah, there's that. I don't know. I mean, if you got to get rid of a body, fucking just set it on fire. Fucking bury it in a hole and cover it in quicklime. I don't know. Don't do that. Anywho.
Stop helping criminals, Mike. All right.
I mean, hypothetically speaking. That's our John Dee episode. This is going to be a special remix edition for our season 4 finale.
Yay.
Woo! We made it this far. Coming back next week. It's going to be our season 5 premiere in our arbitrary numbering system. We're going to get a little ufological with it, or ufo-illogical. But I'm afraid I can't do that, Dave. Yeah, it's going to be a weird one. I mean, really weird. We're coming back to the modern age, I feel like, with Halloween and a lot of these people we've been covering recently. We've been spending too much time back in these dark ages.
With these batteries and stuff.
So yeah, this is gonna be a good old fashioned fun romp involving UFOs and a little orgone on the side,
and some good times,
and some cryptids. I think this will actually be technically our first cryptid episode.
Quite possibly, yes.
So yeah, it's a whole. It's a whole spicy melange. It's a whole gumbo.
We did have a dog man called into the show.
That's true. I forgot about that. Well, I'm glad Dog Man got it first, at least.
Yeah.
I see. That's why I was kind of like wishy-washy about using the word cryptid, because I can't quite. It's weird. It's a weird, sort of nebulous zone. I'll say.
Not everyone's favorite. I'll tell you that.
What, cryptids?
Yeah.
Well, see, that's why I'm saying, like, I don't know if we can necessarily classify this as cryptid. It's very different, I'll say. It's very strange, and out of left field. But it's some good old-fashioned, man, that's a crazy motherfucker.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, wow, this is different. How have I never heard of this? And I guarantee the vast majority of you will, this is going to be another one of those weird, very obscure, esoteric, well, that was certainly different. So,
and it's not the Boggy Creek Monster.
Oh, fuck the Boggy Creek Monster.
That's right. That shit's not real. All right. Thank you very much. For the Kooks, Pranks, and Iconoclast podcast, I am Matt.
I'm Mike.
We will catch you guys on the next one.
See you next week. Do you do?